Chapter 221. The Great Betrayal. Grag whimpered as he raised his crossbow. He wasn't some great warrior of the legions of wrath. He was just a bottom-feeder con man from the greed ring. He was just thrown down here because he pissed off the wrong guy. He doesn't know how to fight. He thought he would just be guarding a fortress, the best fortress in this eternal battlefield. Grag thought he would be safe, but yet here he was, the very fortress he was in, the same fortress lying the Pride Ring's banner which has not seen battle for 1,000 years, it was under attack. Not by demons but by some kind of hive. It was like the old stories, how waves of fangs and claws washed over the world. He shot a bolt into the mass of swarming bodies, there were so many of them that he didn't even have to aim. There was crackle from the cheap earpiece he was wearing and he had this disjointed message. All stations. Prepare. Defenses are. What did that say? Another poorly trained demon said shakily as he looked at Grag. No idea. Grag stammered in response. At that exact moment, some kind of projectile hit the other soldier in the head. There was a flash of light, and the soldier's head was turned into a red mist. Grag gasped as he watched the body crumple to the ground. They're shooting back. One voice shouted far down the line. Grag looked over the wall to see new, horrifying creatures emerge. Prepare. Costs. It was then that it hit Grag. From the dark recesses of his memory the old stories emerged. His heart pounded as he remembered the old tale, one whispered around the fires. They called it the Shroud, an ancient, silent magic that feasted on other magic, leaving armies cut off and powerless. It was just another one of the myriad of tools the Hive used to smother their enemies. The tales had warned that the Shroud moved like a shadowed mist, rolling across battlefields, drawn to magic like a moth to flame. When it fell, spellcasters would feel their power wane, their chants swallowed mid-verse, their wards dissolving like smoke. Messages that would have flown instantly to comrades were stopped cold, caught in the thick, enchanted silence. The Shroud turned all magic into dead air, leaving even the brightest mages as helpless as ordinary men. He glanced down at his crossbow and he saw the glowing runes start to flicker. The Shroud jammed magic, and that means they were in a hell a lot of shit. Retreat. Repeat. Retreat. Inner wall. Hollow bullet, backquote degree. Degree backquote. Hollow bullet. As you can see we are in a bit of a predicament. Lucifer stated coldly as the projection ended. I'm more surprised you managed to get the recording off some grunt. Beelzebub commented. He died shortly after this. Somehow, the recording crystal lasted long enough to send the transmission. Some of my mages suspect he was struck with some sort of ether attack, which supercharged the transmission just enough to punch through the Shroud. Lucifer replied. Ah, the age-old trick of dumb luck. Asmodeus said with a laugh. A hive with a shroud. That is concerning. Leviathan murmured. Concerning enough that we are all here. Mammon added. Indeed. Satan said. Beelzebub glanced around the room and surveyed the scene. It was honestly quite the sight, the lord of the searing hells all gathered in one place. The meeting room was a grand hall carved from obsidian and lit by an eerie, flickering glow that seemed to emanate from within the walls, casting shadows that twisted and contorted like souls in silent agony. 7 towering pillars rose around the room, each fashioned from the unique material of its ruler's domain, gleaming molten rock, blackened bone, charred iron, poisoned crystal, and more. The floor was a vast expanse of polished onyx, veined with molten lava, giving the illusion of walking over a cracked, fiery abyss, and with each step, the glassy surface seemed to tremble, as though barely containing the fury beneath. At the center stood a table forged from a strange fusion of tortured metals and petrified wood, shaped in a heptagon to represent the unity and rivalry of the 7 rulers. Each side was engraved with symbols of a different ring, pulsating with dark magic that responded to its ruler's presence. High-backed chairs of ashwood and black iron surrounded the table, each customized subtly to fit the dark aesthetic of its master, from the clawed feet of one to the thorned armrests of another. This was a chamber of convergence for the infernal lords, bound by dark allegiance yet poised on the knife's edge of betrayal. The call of the 7 was only ever enacted when a crisis is at hand. An ancient hive awakening from a destroyed mine would definitely qualify. Satan's precious fortress has been completely overrun, the reports say its 150,000 strong garrison has been lost, slaughtered to the last. Although that number is a bit dramatic, due to the quality of its construction, the fortress was in reality undermanned. 50,000 of the troops were conscripts which were basically useless against an ancient hive. 30,000 were support personnel which were also useless in a fight. That left only 70,000 Pride Ring regulars which were less experienced than your average soldiers since the fortress saw so little fighting. So when the wave of hive creatures slammed against its defenses, said defenses caved like a tin can. Honestly, Beelzebub was getting some second thoughts. The speed of which the hive has grown was disconcerting. In a matter of months, the great beast has grown an entire army in the searing hells, an army that will only prove to grow stronger as time passes. 150,000 dead soldiers was just 150,000 sacks of meat for the hive. Amongst those in the no anti-hive strategy has one core tenet. Only take the fights that you are absolutely sure you can win decisively. If a hive wins a fight, their losses are effectively zero, they just reassimilate all the dead and they come back stronger since they are bolstered by their fallen foes. Somehow in the back of her mind, that old danger sense was screaming at her. She was flying awfully close to the sun, and the worst part is she has no idea if her wings had already melted. The last time we fought a hive we had someone on our side. Asmodeus said, and Lucifer shot him a deathly glare. Morningstar isn't here to save us now, Beelzebub muttered. We will handle it on our own, and I hope we all agree to cooperate on this threat, Lucifer said, and he received this strained silence in response. Convenient that you are asking for it now that the hive is smashing into your territory. Satan replied, and Lucifer shot him a glare. If the hive devours all my troops, they will come for you next. They will come stronger and far more eager. Lucifer retorted. Say we do help you, the ones who are weakened the most will be pounced on by the rest and risk losing everything. Asmodeus added. Why do you think I'm barricading myself into my territory? Beelzebub muttered in response. Lucifer narrowed his eyes as he examined the room. He smelled a plot, and if it was what he thought it was by far the stupidest gamble possible. Beelzebub's attitude had not gone unnoticed. Lucifer, sharp-eyed and attuned to the faintest hint of betrayal, observed her closely as the hive tore through the land. It struck him how entirely prepared she seemed, how her forces pulled back with swift, exacting precision, as if anticipating each move. Where others struggled to rally forces and forge uneasy alliances to hold the hive at bay, she stood apart, strangely unmoved by their desperate calls for unity. She hadn't even feigned interest in joining the fight, a curious choice, considering the hive's relentless spread threatened them all. But Beelzebub had shown no surprise, no hesitation. Her borders were fortified, her legions arranged like pieces on a board she'd set long before the hive emerged. Lucifer felt a chill as he watched her, detached and calculating amid the rising chaos. She was too prepared, her defenses too perfectly timed, and her indifference too practiced. It was as though she had been waiting, knowing the hive would strike, but never intending to face it directly. The others might believe she was simply protecting her own, but to Lucifer, it was something more, a silent admission that she was 2 steps ahead, harboring knowledge none of them had. Watching her from his perch, he couldn't ignore the sinking feeling that she had planned every step, her eyes fixed not on survival, but on what advantage she might seize when the hive's devastation had run its course. Of course, there was also the fact that the mine's explosion was far too convenient, a giant flaming blast perfect for removing any witnesses or evidence. Lucifer's attention shifted to Satan, Lord of Wrath. In the past, Satan had always been predictable, aggressive, and impulsive, a force of raw fury that tore through obstacles rather than outmaneuvering them. But now, something had changed. His forces were no longer charging recklessly into battle or sprawling in chaotic formations. Instead, they moved with an eerie precision, stationed at choke points, critical pathways, and regions most vulnerable to the hive's spread. Each deployment seemed tactical and prophetic, as if Satan knew where the hive would strike next. Gone was the wild abandon, the thunderous declarations. In its place was a chilling calm, a ruthless calculation that spoke of forethought rather than fury. Lucifer couldn't shake the suspicion that Satan knew more about the hive than he let on. His forces were positioned almost too conveniently, like pieces on a board where he already knew the next moves. It was as if, in casting off his reckless ways, Satan had adopted a more insidious approach, one that could only come from a foreknowledge of the hive's patterns. He had arranged his armies not for battle against rival rulers, as they'd all assumed, but as if prepared to contain and control the hive. Watching him, Lucifer began to wonder if the Lord of Wrath had grown wise enough or cunning enough to see an opportunity in the hive's chaos, using its devastation to fortify his own power and perhaps even undermine the other lords. For the first time, a dark suspicion began to take root in Lucifer's mind as he observed the uncanny synchronicity between Beelzebub's fortified withdrawal and Satan's strategic positioning. Both of them were behaving with a restraint and precision utterly unlike their former selves, as if they were no longer acting independently, but as 2 pieces of the same plan. Beelzebub's refusal to ally openly, Her quiet withdrawal into fortified positions, and Satan's uncharacteristic patience in reinforcing vital choke points, all of it hinted at a scheme too cohesive to be coincidence. Lucifer couldn't ignore the possibility that they'd formed a secret alliance, a hidden pact to let the Hive wreak its devastation on the others while they positioned themselves to seize control once the dust settled. Or perhaps even worse, that one of them released the Hive knowingly, willing to burn it all to ash so they could rule the ashes. The more Lucifer dwelled on the idea, the more sinister it seemed. If Satan and Beelzebub had indeed joined forces, they were playing a game more dangerous than Hell's usual feuds. By keeping their alliance secret, they could manipulate the chaos to their advantage, each acting independently enough to avoid suspicion but moving with a deadly synchronicity to ensure the Hive struck hardest at their rivals. It would explain why Beelzebub seemed so unconcerned with the Hive's threat and why Satan's armies seemed so perfectly poised for containment rather than destruction. Together, they might wield the Hive like a weapon, an unstoppable force they'd unleash upon Hell until only their forces remained strong enough to rebuild from the ruin. Watching from his perch, Lucifer felt an unfamiliar chill, realizing that the true threat lay not in the Hive alone but in the silent, serpentine alliance it had brought to life. Asmodeus, too, seemed to be playing a dangerous game, though his approach was markedly different from Satan and Beelzebub's careful, calculated movements. The Lord of Lust had always thrived on manipulation and indulgence, and now, in the wake of the Hive's awakening, he seemed unusually eager to form alliances, almost desperate to present himself as a willing partner in the fight against the swarms. His forces, though not as strategically positioned as Satan's, were mobilizing with enthusiasm, almost too much enthusiasm, as though he were attempting to align himself with whoever would take him in, offering his troops an influence as if it were the key to saving Hell from the Hive's wrath. Yet, something about Asmodeus's eagerness felt off to Lucifer, a scent of desperation beneath the surface charm. His willingness to forge alliances, to pledge his forces so openly, made Lucifer wary. It wasn't like Asmodeus to play the part of the humble ally, and Lucifer couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to his actions than simple self-preservation. Was he trying to position himself as a leader in the new order that would rise from the Hive's chaos? Or was it possible that Asmodeus, too, had a hidden agenda, perhaps one that wasn't just about survival but about using the Hive's destruction as a stage for his own ambitions? In his eagerness, there was something hollow, a glimmer of something darker beneath his outward charm that only Lucifer could sense. Where Beelzebub and Satan were calculating, Asmodeus seemed to be grasping at the opportunity to forge alliances without truly considering the cost of what he might end up giving away in the process. Lucifer's mind raced as the pieces of a dark, intricate puzzle clicked into place. The Hive's return now felt like something far more sinister. It was clear to him now. The Hive was no longer just a threat, it was the perfect smokescreen for a plot much darker. Beelzebub's unnerving calm, Satan's calculated troop movements, and Asmodeus's eagerness to form alliances, all of it pointed to a single, terrifying possibility: the freeing of Magna Morningstar. Magna Morningstar had once stood above all the lords as the prime evil, the true and undivided ruler of Hell. Her power eclipsed even the might of the Seven Lords, and it was she who had once defeated the Hive's predecessors in an ancient war, securing Hell's dominance over this plane of existence. But her reign had come to a brutal end. The other lords uniting in a rebellion had imprisoned her deep within an unbreakable prison, locking her away with 7 enchanted keys, each held by one of the lords. The keys were bound to them, their essence entwined with their dominions, and only by combining all 7 could she be freed. In their haste to secure their own power, they had sealed away the one being who had truly ruled Hell, the prime evil. Now, Lucifer realized, perhaps the Hive was the perfect cover for an insidious plot. Perhaps Beelzebub, Satan, and Asmodeus weren't preparing to survive the Hive, they might be preparing to free Magna Morningstar. Beelzebub's careful detachment, her readiness when the Hive struck, now made sense. She had known the Hive would drive the lords to panic, each scrambling to protect their realm from the swarming threat. In that chaos, the lords would be persuaded to give up their keys, thinking it was the only way to ensure Hell's survival. Beelzebub had patiently waited for this moment, understanding that the return of the Hive would manipulate the others into setting Morningstar free. Satan's true goal was not to stop the Hive, but to position himself as an ally to the prime evil, hoping to share in the power Magna would once again command. Asmodeus's eagerness to form alliances only deepened Lucifer's suspicions. His willingness to offer his forces to the other lords, to align himself with whatever faction seemed most advantageous, wasn't out of loyalty, it was a move to ensure his own survival and leverage once Magna was freed from her prison. The hive's return was merely a distraction, a means to force the seven lords into a frenzy of survival, convincing each of them that their only hope of saving hell was to surrender their key. But what they didn't realize was that in her freedom, she would not only reclaim her title as the prime evil but would crush all who had betrayed her. Hell's balance of power would shift once more, and this time, the lords who had betrayed her would find themselves beneath her heel. Lucifer was all too familiar with Magna Morningstar's vengeful nature, having served closely under her during her reign as the prime evil. He had witnessed her wrath firsthand, and it was a force unlike any other in hell. Her vengeance was not a mere reaction, it was a calculated, relentless pursuit of those who dared to cross her. It was said that when she was wronged, entire legions would be wiped from existence in the blink of an eye, entire realms reduced to rubble beneath her fury. Unlike the other lords, who sought power for the sake of dominion, Morningstar's wrath was personal, driven by betrayal and pride. She did not simply punish her enemies, she obliterated them, leaving no trace of their existence. Lucifer had been there when she exacted retribution on those who plotted against her, a chilling reminder of the price of defying her. It was because of this close proximity to her power that Lucifer understood the true magnitude of the danger now facing the seven lords. If Magna were freed, her thirst for revenge would know no bounds, and Lucifer knew that none of them would escape unscathed. She had once crushed those who had betrayed her without mercy, and if the seven lords were foolish enough to set her free, they would soon learn the price of their own treachery. Magna Morningstar had always been a loyalist to the Firstborn, the ancient and cruel gods who had once ruled the realms before the current order of hell. She had served them unflinchingly, carrying out their merciless will across worlds. The Firstborn's influence had shaped her in ways few could comprehend. They were gods of unimaginable power and cruelty, beings whose very existence was a testament to destruction and domination. Under their reign, entire realms had been wiped from existence, and civilizations were extinguished with a mere thought. Magna had been their favored servant, an extension of their malice, executing their will without question, and in her unyielding loyalty, she had hoped to one day see their return. It was this very loyalty that led to her downfall. The seven lords, once allies in the shared pursuit of power, grew fearful of Magna's ambitions. They suspected that she had not only kept her loyalty to the Firstborn alive but was actively searching for ways to bring them back and restore the primordial gods to their rightful place. Her obsession with their return, with resurrecting the old order, became a threat they could no longer ignore. Fearing that she would bring ruin to the delicate balance of power in hell by resurrecting beings that were far more ruthless than any of them, the lords united against her, accusing her of treason. This betrayal led to her imprisonment, with the seven lords using the keys to lock her away, believing they had sealed her ambition and the potential return of the Firstborn forever. Morningstar would most definitely enact some brand of terrible revenge and then proceed to wreak havoc on those who fought against the Firstborn. There was the suspicion that she was aiding some rebel watchers in some long-term plan to preserve the Firstborn. From what threat he did not know, but the suspicions grew too great and in fear they imprisoned her. Morningstar cannot be free, or Lucifer himself would be flayed alive. It was then that Beelzebub spoke and her words grated against his mind like sandpaper. It seems things aren't nearly bad enough out there for us to reach an agreement. Chapter 222. Clash of Titans. You think things are bad enough now? Captain Arantosh deadpanned as he watched that now infamous towering monstrosity hack the gate in two. The hive swarmed over the walls, and Captain Arantosh just watched as the defenders panicked. He watched through his binoculars as one soldier was tackled right off the wall, and he fell into the writhing mass of hive soldiers below. Bad way to go, Sergeant Moorish muttered from beside him. The two of them were scouts, and they were currently observing the fall of another fortress. This one belonged to Envy, and they were not doing well. Their mistress Beelzebub was wise enough to see this coming, so they had fortified their borders. This meant they didn't take much damage, but that was more concerning than comforting. They didn't take much damage not because they defended well. They got off lightly because the hive only sent light probing attacks against them. It was plainly obvious from the troop movements that whatever was controlling the hives was very intelligent. They only hit the places that would be the most impactful. Logistics hubs had been raided and razed, supply caravans had been butchered, and critical staging areas had been struck ahead of the arrival of the main force. Half of the line was starving all across the plains of eternal conflict. As far as Arantosh could tell, the only reason his side had been spared was that his mistress had planned the defenses and executed them so far in advance that even the hive felt it was a waste of time. Okay. This is looking bad, Arantosh muttered as he spotted a small group of flying demons hurtling towards that massive monster. Looks like Leviathan is sending out his reavers. Let's see if they do anything to that monstrosity, Morish added. The Reavers are elite demons serving Leviathan, the Lord of Envy, known for their precision strikes and mastery in eliminating priority targets. Cloaked in shadows, their shifting faces reflect stolen desires, leaving only despair in their wake. Armed with barbed weapons and unmatched cunning, they spread discord with calculated efficiency, turning allies into foes to fulfill their master's will. Unfortunately for them, their foe was a hive monster devoid of envy and desires, impervious to their manipulative tactics. As the Reavers soared in for the kill, the creature released a colossal magical pulse, a surge of blinding energy that tore through the air. The force blasted them from the skies, sending their shadowy forms hurtling to the ground below. They landed amidst the swarming soldiers of the hive, who wasted no time in tearing into them with savage efficiency. Their once elite ranks were shredded, their twisted forms ripped apart in a storm of claws and fangs, utterly consumed by the relentless tide of the hive. Damn, the Reavers did nothing, Arantosh muttered. If that thing turns its eyes to our lands, we are in a lot of trouble, Morish muttered. Arantosh shifted slightly in the shadow of a jagged outcrop, his eyes fixed on the monstrous hive beast in the distance. His mind churned with unease, a gnawing certainty curling in his belly. It doesn't falter, doesn't tire. What kind of creature moves with such single-minded purpose? The beast was a living nightmare, a writhing amalgamation of carapace and sinew, its form pulsating with unnatural energy. Its very presence seemed to warp the land around it, leaving churned earth and lifeless husks in its wake. Nothing has slowed it down. His thoughts stumbled over that last realization, the memory of those supposed elite warriors being swatted from the air and torn apart like fragile toys. Arantosh had watched from the fringes, his heart sinking as he saw the Reavers get torn to pieces. Yes, he was not expecting them to win, but he was at least expecting a fight. This thing, whatever it was, must have been sleeping far below the ground when that blast woke it up. Did his mistress know about this thing? If she did, then she was playing a dangerous game. This was a creature straight out of the era of the old. Then a great portal opened and out stepped a towering abomination of infernal iron. The air above the battlefield shimmered unnaturally, a ripple of heat and energy that froze even the hive beast mid-strike. Arantosh's brow furrowed as a flicker of crimson light split the horizon, expanding rapidly into a swirling vortex of flame and shadow. A low, resonant groan echoed across the valley, growing louder, until the ground beneath his feet trembled with its intensity. The hive beast turned toward the disturbance, its eyeless head tilting as it issued a guttural hiss of challenge. The portal tore itself wider, spewing arcs of fiery lightning and thick plumes of smoke. Arantosh adjusted the binoculars, and his stomach twisted at the sight of the massive claw that emerged. It was jagged and grotesque, forged of blackened steel and dripping with molten slag. The claw gripped the edge of the portal, pulling forth the rest of the monstrosity. The Hell Titan emerged in full, its immense form rivaling even the hive beast in size. Its molten eyes flared to life, cutting through the haze like twin suns. Blackened steel plates bristled with jagged spines and chains, and glowing runes carved into its frame pulsed with an infernal energy that seemed to suck the light from the battlefield. The Titan's movements were deliberate, almost ceremonial, as it stepped forward from the portal. Each step sent shockwaves rippling across the valley, the ground melting beneath its feet. Arantosh lowered the binoculars, his pulse quickening. No, he whispered, the weight of realization settling over him. Those fools actually sent it out. Those monsters were also monstrosities from the era of the old gods. They were designed to fight the largest of the old gods' abominations. So complex was its construction that there were only a few left, and no one had any idea how to make more. In their desperation to save their fortress, they had unleashed an uncontrollable monster upon the world. It was not an ally or a savior, it was a weapon of last resort, summoned to level the playing field against the hive beast. Arantosh raised the binoculars again as the Titan turned its blazing eyes on the hive beast. The beast screeched and lunged, its limbs slamming into the Titan with an earth-shaking impact. The Titan staggered slightly, then retaliated. A massive, molten claw lashed out, tearing through the beast's armored hide, sending chunks of chitin and steaming ichor splattering across the battlefield. The hive beast roared in fury, but the Titan pressed forward, chains whipping from its shoulders to ensnare the beast's limbs. The battlefield became a clash of titans, a cataclysm of fire and flesh. Arantosh could barely keep his grip on the binoculars as the battle unfolded in a storm of flame and destruction. The Hell Titan, with its infernal strength, struck with unrelenting fury. Its massive claws lashed out, each blow accompanied by the screeching rattle of chains. The Titan's fists pounded against the hive beast's thick carapace with molten fury, splintering the outer layers with each strike, but the beast retaliated with cold, ruthless strikes. One of its tendrils, thick as a tree trunk and tipped with spiked barbs, lashed out, wrapping around the Titan's leg. The Titan roared as the beast heaved, pulling the colossal machine off balance. A powerful arm swung, crashing into the Titan's side, sending a shockwave that crumbled a nearby tower of the fortress, sending debris scattering in all directions. The Titan staggered, but its chains lashed out, wrapping around the beast's limbs, pulling it in close. But the hive beast was not easily contained. It roared, its mouth opening wide, revealing rows of jagged teeth. It twisted and squirmed, snapping the chains with its unnatural strength. With a furious shriek, it lunged forward, claws raking across the Titan's chest, ripping through its steel armor like paper. The Titan groaned, a deep, echoing sound that vibrated through the very earth, as molten blood began to spill from the wound, sizzling as it hit the ground. Arantosh could see the fortress walls beginning to crumble from the sheer force of the battle. The hive beast, in its primal rage, had already leveled one side of the fortress, its spiny limbs tearing through the thick stone like a child tearing through clay. The defenders had long since retreated, their last desperate stand now a futile memory. What had once been a bastion was now a hollow shell, a ruin surrounded by the twisted wreckage of the battle. The ground beneath was cracking, fissures opening as the two titans continued their battle, their fury splitting the earth itself. The Hell Titan swung its chains once more, attempting to ensnare the beast's limbs, but the beast twisted with inhuman agility. It countered with a blinding burst of speed, slamming its entire bulk into the Titan's chest, sending it hurtling backward. The Titan's enormous form crashed into a crumbling tower, the structure collapsing in a pile of dust and stone. For a moment, it lay motionless, stunned by the impact. The hive beast didn't pause. It advanced, relentless. With another guttural roar, the beast bore down on the fallen Titan, its massive body towering above, preparing for the final blow. One of its enormous claws swept down, crashing into the Titan's head with an explosive crunch. The Titan's armored skull shattered under the impact, molten metal spraying in every direction as the Titan's body shuddered violently. It was still for a moment, then its limbs twitched, slowly, agonizingly. But the Titan was done. The beast had shattered its core. The hive beast stood over the fallen Hell Titan, victorious, its many eyes glowing with a dark, unyielding malice. It had won. The Titan's reign of destruction, summoned to defend the fortress, had ended in failure. The beast had overwhelmed it with sheer tenacity and primal might. Now, as the Titan's massive form lay broken and lifeless, the hive beast turned its attention back to the crumbling fortress, its victory sealed by the fall of its infernal adversary. Arantosh watched, heart sinking as he realized what had just occurred. The Titan had been summoned to protect the fortress, to stop the hive beast, but in the end, it was the Titan that had failed. Worse still, the hive beast was still standing, its hunger for destruction far from sated. As the hive beast shrieked again, its chilling cry echoing through the valley, Arantosh could feel the weight of the consequences. In their desperation, the forces of envy had unleashed something they could not control, and now it would be their undoing. As the ground continued to tremble beneath the beast's movements, Arantosh's mind raced with the implications. The hive beast had triumphed, and envy had lost one of its trump cards and found itself weakened beyond what losing that fortress would mean. It was a horrific strategic failure, one they would not recover from. As the hive beast stood victorious, looming over the wreckage of the Hell Titan, something deep within the Titan's fractured body began to shift. The ground beneath Arantosh's feet trembled, not from the footsteps of the hive beast, but from the violent pulse of infernal energy building within the Titan. The beast, towering above its fallen foe, was unaware of the dormant force that had been triggered with the catastrophic blow to the Titan's head. Arantosh's breath caught in his throat as he realized what was happening. The Titan's molten eyes flickered, their fiery glow sputtering in the dim light. The massive frame, now half collapsed and ruined, groaned as if it were alive, as if it still had the strength to fight. But this was not a fight, it was something far worse. A final act of destruction. The core. The Hell Titan's heart was not merely mechanical. It was a twisted furnace of infernal power, a concoction of dark magics and molten energy, fueled by the deepest pits of hell itself. And that core, cracked and ruptured by the beast's relentless assault, was now primed for one final, catastrophic release. Arantosh's eyes widened as the first signs of the explosion became visible. A pulse of fiery energy shot through the cracks in the Titan's body, seeping through the jagged seams of its armored frame. The ground beneath the fallen Titan began to bubble and crack, molten lava rising from the depths of the crater where it had collapsed. The heat was unbearable, even from miles away. The air shimmered and twisted with unnatural intensity, as if the very fabric of reality were warping under the strain of the Titan's dying breath. Shit! Arantosh screamed as both he and Morish scrambled for cover. They were far away, but that blast would glass the valley. The two of them dashed through the jagged terrain, scrambling away from the cliffside edge. Behind them, the battlefield was quickly descending into madness, the heat growing unbearable as the Hell Titan's core ruptured with apocalyptic force. They ran, breathless, scrambling toward a narrow outcrop of jagged stone that jutted from the cliffside, barely big enough for both of them. Get to the outcrop. Morish's voice was strained, his words clipped as he grabbed Arantosh's arm once more, pulling him with desperate urgency. We can't outrun it. Throw up a barrier. Everything you have. Arantosh screamed. All pretense of stealth was out the window. That blast could kill everything in the vicinity, so there was no point in hiding their magical signature. Their barrier would glow like a bonfire, but a star was about to explode next to them. They reached the outcrop just as the world seemed to collapse in on itself. Arantosh's breath caught in his throat, but there was no time to think. Morish was already moving, his hands raised, glowing with the pulsing energy of his magic. Arantosh stumbled into place beside him, scrambling to contribute. His hands shook with the effort, but he too began to channel the raw arcane forces around him, feeding everything he had into the magic barrier they were about to create. The outcrop would block the direct hit, but force like that would still hit them indirectly. The heat, the ether radiation, many things would kill them. The world exploded into light. The Titan's core detonated in an earth-shattering blast. The air around them warped, bending under the sheer pressure of the infernal force. The ground beneath them cracked open as if the very bones of the earth were being ripped apart. A deafening roar of pure power swallowed all sound, sight, and sensation. It was as though time itself had been torn asunder, and Arantosh was no longer sure where his body ended and the force of the explosion began. Arantosh shoved all his fear and confusion aside, concentrating on the magic coursing through his body, forcing the energy into the shape of a shield. He could feel it draining from him, the strain of the spell almost unbearable, but he pushed forward. The crackling energy shot from his hands and swirled around them, forming a dome of blue light just as the blast wave struck. The barrier flared bright, blindingly so, as the shockwave slammed into it. Arantosh's breath was stolen from him as the force rattled him to his very bones. The world outside became a chaotic storm of fire and destruction. The outcrop they were sheltering behind shuddered violently, as though the very stone they clung to would be torn from the mountainside. The magic shield buckled, the surface rippling and shattering under the weight of the explosion. They were just trying to block what was effectively the secondhand turbulence from the blast, but it was enough to cause his shield to buckle. The heat that surged against them was unbearable waves of fire, ash, and molten rock. It was as if the world itself was being glassed, scorched clean of life and structure. Arantosh could feel the heat searing the very air around them, his lungs struggling to find purchase in the suffocating atmosphere. He looked on in horror as lava spewed over their heads from the molten outcrop, the red, glowing liquid pooled over their shield as the stone around them melted. The roar of the explosion was deafening, the sheer force of it shaking the cliffside, the rocks and earth around them crumbling away in an instant. He could hear the deep, guttural sound of Morish's incantations, but it was drowned by the tumult outside. The shield continued to flicker and pulse, fighting against the overwhelming tide of energy. The light around them was blinding, and Arantosh had to force his eyes open to see the magic still holding firm, still protecting them. Hold it. Morish gritted out, sweat pouring down his face as he poured every ounce of his energy into the barrier. His voice was strained, his body trembling from the raw effort, but they had no choice. They could not let the shield break. The seconds stretched into eternity as they fought against the overwhelming power of the core's explosion. The pressure on the shield built and built until Arantosh felt it would collapse under the weight. He couldn't hear anything but the pounding of his heart and the endless scream of energy crashing against them. His muscles burned, his vision blurred. Then, finally, there was a shift. The earth stilled beneath them, the roar of the blast began to fade into a distant echo, and the weight of the explosion began to lessen. The shield flickered weakly, then stabilized. They were alive, but barely. Arantosh collapsed to his knees, gasping for air, his vision swimming with the aftermath of the infernal blast. The shield had held, just barely. They both took a moment to catch their breaths. They both cast protective enchantments over themselves and gingerly tried to get out of the outcrop. They had no choice but to use flight to escape. The entire landscape around them was just a sea of ether-charged magma. They tried to gain some altitude. It wasn't stealthy, but whatever was around them was most definitely dead. As the smoke and ash began to settle, the world around them was unrecognizable. The land had been scorched glass and ash as far as the eye could see. The fortress was gone, and they could barely make out the form of the hive beast lying in the dirt. Arantosh let out a shuddering gasp of air before shakily reaching for the device on his arm. He was about to send a transmission when Morish suddenly breathed shakily. That thing is still alive, Morish stammered, and Arantosh looked up to see the beast's tendrils raise up before slamming into the molten ground. The ether shimmered in the air, swirling like smoke, and the tendrils absorbed it greedily, pulsing with a sickly glow. The earth around the beast buckled and withered, the landscape itself draining as the creature's wounds began to mend. Flesh and chitin sealed themselves back together with an unsettling speed, cracks in its exoskeleton knitting themselves closed as if the beast were being reborn with each pulse of stolen energy. Oh, fuck, it's getting back up. Chapter 223, Drunken Haze. You have got to be kidding me. Beelzebub muttered as she watched the footage. The Titan exploded, and from what the footage shows, it exploded like one would expect from an ether void furnace overloading. An ether void furnace was a twisted invention by some of the old Fireborn. Each ether void furnace was irreplaceable since no one could make one. No one could trigger that void reaction in the furnace, which relied on a degree of magical control out of reach of the younger races. They knew the theory of how to create it, but no one knew how to cast the magic. So here they were sitting on these super weapons and trying not to get them destroyed. When one of these furnaces detonate, it releases a blast so powerful, it could level a city. One of those blasts just hit one of the hive's monstrosities. Not only did it not kill it, the fucking thing got back up. It was damaged, sure, but honestly, most things would have been vaporized. Beelzebub had some second thoughts about all of this, but as the old saying goes, the die is cast. Are you so sure we took the right side now? Satan growled from his seat next to her. More sure than ever, as long as I disregard the primal fear in my belly. Beelzebub said. So we are on the side of ruin. Satan said. I thought we were always on the side of ruin. Beelzebub asked wryly. Not like this. Satan added, and Beelzebub nodded grimly. Beelzebub leaned back in her chair, her golden eyes glimmering with irritation. It would seem, she began, that we've gravely underestimated the firstborn. Satan rested his elbows on his knees, his fiery gaze fixed on the rug. Underestimated. We barely comprehended them. Satan muttered. We thought aligning with an old god would strengthen our position, destabilize the balance of the realms. We sided with the firstborn because we believed they'd win. But the firstborn is no mere ally, he is owner come to reclaim what is rightfully his, and he has all the power in the world to back it up. Beelzebub said as her lips tightened. Satan's voice darkened. The firstborn knew what he was doing. They gave us a seat at the table at the cost of unleashing his dark will upon existence. The hive consumes, and its shadow stretches farther every moment. Beelzebub rose abruptly, pacing toward the window. Her silhouette framed the faint glow of the realm beyond as her wings shifted restlessly. Now, I see how small we are in his design. He didn't need our help, we just sped things along as all. Satan stood, his horns casting jagged shadows. Then we lean into that design. We chose our side, Beelzebub, and there's no turning back now. The firstborn will consume the realms, and we'll rise in their shadow. If we falter, we'll be swept away like the rest. Beelzebub turned, her expression hardening. Then we see it through. Whatever remains, we've placed our bet on the strongest force in existence. If it means a world in ruin, so be it. Satan's voice was cold but resolute. Better to be a part of the inevitable than to be destroyed by it. We embraced this path because it was the winning one. Now, we commit. The room fell silent, the flickering candlelight casting their intertwined shadows against the ancient walls. I only hope we did not bite off more than we could chew. No doubt they are scheming as we speak. Hollow bullet, backquote degree. Degree backquote, hollow bullet. Woo. I screamed as the party raged. We were in a club in treachery, and I was taking full advantage of this humanoid body. I downed another bottle of their piss-poor wine as some nearby demons cheered me on. Stepping inside this place was like plunging into a fever dream of excess. The walls were mirrored obsidian, their surfaces fractured in intricate, purposeful patterns that multiplied the room's glow. Gold veins ran through the cracks, pulsing faintly as if carrying molten life. Overhead, a massive chandelier hung suspended in midair, its tendrils of molten glass dripping light like liquid fire. The flames within danced to the rhythm of the music, casting sinuous shadows that seemed to writhe across every surface. At the heart of the space was the dance floor, an expanse of glowing panels that pulsed in time with the music. The floor shimmered with a gradient of hellish reds and purples, each step sending ripples of light coursing outwards like drops of blood in water. The dancers moved with unrestrained abandon. Above the main floor, elevated platforms framed the space like a theater, each one holding performers who commanded attention. They twisted and spun on poles of gold, their bodies clad in shimmering fabrics that caught every flicker of light. Some danced in pairs, their motions weaving stories of forbidden passion, while others balanced on impossibly thin tightropes that wove between the rafters. Wisps of smoke and fire followed their movements, painting the air with trails of light. The bar was a testament to infernal design, its long surface a single slab of black crystal that seemed to drink in the room's glow and radiate it back in subtle, shifting waves. Shelves of exotic bottles lined the wall behind it, their contents glowing like bottled stars, each drink promising an experience as unique as its hue. Bartenders moved with practiced motions, their every action precise and experienced, flames and mist flickering from their hands as they mixed elixirs. Even the ceiling was a spectacle. It stretched high above, an endless void speckled with constellations of ember-like lights that shifted and swirled as if alive. Occasional bursts of flame erupted and then dissolved into swirling smoke, casting brief flashes of brilliance that illuminated the crowd below. Around the edges of the room, plush velvet lounges in shades of crimson and black created intimate nooks, draped in gold-threaded curtains that sparkled like liquid starlight. As I was about to reach for another drink, a scantily dressed succubus put herself on my lap as she licked her lips. "Why not me and you go have some fun?" she said as she shifted her body slyly, giving me a good view of her curves. "Now, imagine if I turned off my illusion right now, that would be fun." Ah, the screaming that would ensue, it beast any music. "Out!" a curt voice said as Rosa and the Crowfather entered the booth. They were both disguised as demons and Cerchax followed in shortly after them with Regari in tow. The other demons took one look at Rosa and looked like they wanted to argue. They glanced at the Crowfather and ignored him. Then they looked at Cerchax as she smiled at them like they were a delicious piece of meat. Fear kicked in, and they all fell over themselves trying to leave. Regari was knocked out of the booth in the mad scramble and he ended up tumbling down the short slide of stairs leading up to the booth. "You all right?" the Crowfather asked as stuck his head out the booth. "I'm fine." Regari groaned as he got up and clambered back up the stairs. "Now then, what do we hear?" I asked with a grin. "Fear. Lots of it. People here are acting like it's their last night on Earth," the Crowfather said. "For many of them it might as well be. The drafts are calling up, millions sent to die against the hive," Cerchax said with a grin. I glanced again at the spell wall surrounding us, with the Crowfather casting the magic, nothing was leaking out. As for what is happening out there, well, it was quite the parody. Tomorrow the drafts are in and more would be sent to die. So tonight they were using whatever they had to get any shred of pleasure they could. At the bar, hands slammed down crumpled bills and empty wallets. Drinks disappeared as fast as they were poured. No one cared about the cost. What was debt to the damned? A man laughed too loudly as he ordered another round he couldn't afford, while a woman beside him drained a bottle of liquid fire, her hands shaking. The crowd's pockets, already thin, emptied onto the bar without hesitation, the piles of crumpled money disappearing into the till like a black hole devouring light. The lounges, draped in velvet and glimmering with gold-threaded cushions, told the same story. Guests lounged with an air of forced nonchalance, their laughter just a little too loud, their movements a touch too exaggerated. Some leaned close to whisper secrets or promises, their voices urgent, their gazes flickering with fear. Others sprawled out, clutching goblets of shimmering liquid they couldn't afford, draining them in desperate gulps. A man in a worn suit reached for another round, his fingers shaking as he counted out the last of his savings, while a woman beside him clinked her jeweled goblet against his, murmuring, "Drink like it's your last." It might be. Word had gotten out that a great titan was felled and the beast that felled it took its ether furnace reactor blast and got back up. The age of the ancients had returned, bringing with it an old forgotten horror, a vast, unyielding swarm that ravaged the searing hells. If the demons were sin, then an ancient hive was something far older. The hive was hunger made manifest. The lords of hell, once untouchable in their power, now cowered beneath its shadow. Their armies, once mighty, were crushed effortlessly beneath the hive's relentless march. Desperation was growing among the rulers of hell and of its denizens, their fears creeping out of every dark corner. Many are talking of fleeing. And from what I hear, the enforcers are deserting as well. Better to live as some fugitive rat than to become food for the hive, Rosa said. From what I see, they are already fleeing, Cohesion is breaking down. I said as I noted the intel from my hive. So when is your contact going to be here? Rosa asked. He's here already. Just needs the right excuse to come in here. I said as I glanced at the man in the worn suit. He was holding the last bottle in his hand and he had been just chased away from the bar since he very obviously was drunk and out of coin. I watched as he stumbled left and right until he finally seemingly fell into my booth. As soon as he dropped past the curtains he stood up a bit shakily before downing a potion. In a few seconds his eyes went from groggy to razor sharp. Rather dramatic, don't you think? I asked, and the demon just shrugged. Lady Beelzebub is not available for this chat. Her presence in treachery would draw too much suspicion. The demon said as he took a seat. And how will we talk? I asked, and the demon just held up a hand before going silent. Then his body lurched and spasmed. It lasted but a moment, but soon the demon was reclining into the chair with a very feminine demeanor. Also possession then, why come down here when you can borrow someone else's flesh? I apologize for the look, but it is difficult for me to attend in person. The demon said, his tone of voice completely changing. So what is it you wanted to discuss? I asked, and Beelzebub paused for a moment. Do you feel you can move on from treachery? The balance of power is shifting. Your hive is destroying vast swaths of the local armies. Once you seize control, you will have the rings in a stranglehold. Without Infernis, they will not be able to wage war effectively for long. Put enough pressure on them, most of the demon princes will fold. However, we are all convening to meet on a desperate option. Beelzebub said. Desperate option? The Crowfather asked. They are talking of releasing Magna Morningstar from her prison. Beelzebub said. What's wrong with that? She would be useful. Another ancient on my side is definitely a plus. If she turned out to be hostile, I could just eat her. I replied, and I saw a complicated expression cross her face. Morningstar would not take kindly to our betrayal. I was hoping we could forego that step. Beelzebub said. And why would I forego that step when I have so much to gain? The prime evil of the searing hells would be a valuable weapon against the forces of heaven. Indeed she would be, but her rage would also diminish the searing hells. Her purges would destroy many useful servants. You yourself are already powerful. Do you truly need another ancient? We are more numerous, and having more of us to manage your domain would be more useful. The angels have atrophied just like us. They are not the same race that wiped the firstborn from this world. The Lightborn are dead. There is nothing that can save them now. Beelzebub said. How are you so sure the Lightborn are gone? The Crowfather asked, and I agreed. The Serpahim were a sneaky lot, so I wouldn't be surprised if they hid some of their trump cards. All right, how about this? I said as I prepared to lay my little lie on the table. If I said no, they might work against me. But if I said yes, they would be suspicious. Prove to me that you are more useful than Magna Morningstar. Chapter 224. Pride cometh before the fall. The combat conditions in Hell were proving to be a fascinating challenge, though not insurmountable, far from it actually. My hive was performing well enough, but it was clear that the designs I had made for Terra weren't fully optimized for this new environment. Temperatures ran higher here, water was scarcer, and the endurance my hive could achieve on Terra wasn't quite matching up in Hell. Still, these were manageable adjustments, not crises. One of the more immediate issues was the armor of my soldiers, which had started to show minor wear more frequently. There were no catastrophic failures, and the damage was manageable, but it was enough to make me pause. It wasn't a glaring problem, but a little voice in my mind suggested I dig deeper. Perhaps a subtle flaw in the Hell Hive genome was the culprit, a tiny inefficiency that had gone unnoticed until now. Addressing it could provide a valuable edge and improve resilience dramatically. The scarcity of water and the heat were factors, too, but neither felt like a true roadblock. It simply meant that my hive's systems needed tweaking. Improved thermal resistance, better resource recycling, and perhaps a localized adaptation to Hell's resources would likely do the trick. These were growth opportunities, not signs of failure. My hive had already proven its ability to adapt in Terra. With a few modifications, I was confident it could also excel in Hell. It's all about these minor adjustments. The water issue, for example. I've been thinking about it for a while. The reliance on water, which worked fine on Terra, is actually reducing the hive's fire resistance here. Water's not the problem itself, but it's not helping in this hellish environment. What I need is something better suited for Hell. Something that doesn't just keep them hydrated but actually helps them adapt to the heat. Minerals. Hell's soil is rich in minerals. Why not use that? I can swap some of the water out in the blood for those. The minerals will do more than just hydrate, they'll improve their internal heat resistance. A simple shift, really, but it could make a huge difference. And it'll free up the water for other things. The hive will need it for growth, for supporting the soldiers in more efficient ways. It's like hitting two birds with one stone. And then there's the armor. If I adapt the hive's systems to take advantage of the mineral-rich soil, I can strengthen the exoskeletons, make them more resilient. The soldiers will be able to endure longer in combat, and the hive's overall structural integrity will improve. Alright, so if I'm going to harden their bones with these minerals, there's something else I need to account for. It'll make them stronger, sure, but heavier too. That added weight from the denser bones could be a problem if I don't think ahead. They'll be slower, less agile, maybe even more prone to fatigue if I don't adjust things. The solution's simple, though. More muscle. If I increase the muscle density in the hive, they'll be able to move with the same speed and power they had before the bones were hardened. The muscles will need to be stronger to carry the extra weight, so I'll need to tweak their genetic structure to increase their muscle mass proportionally. It all comes down to the ratio, doesn't it? Muscle to bone, armor to weight, strength to agility, finding that sweet spot is the key. Too much muscle and I'm going to have to layer on more armor just to keep them protected, which in turn adds weight, which, you guessed it, makes them slower. Too little muscle, and the denser bones won't be supported properly, and the extra weight could cause fatigue or worse, immobility. And then there's the armor. More muscle needs more protection. But the armor can't just keep adding up. I can't have them looking like walking tanks. If the armor gets too heavy, it negates everything I've done with the muscles. So, I need to keep the armor light but strong enough to handle the hits. Something that moves with them, not against them. The more armor, the more weight, there's no getting around that. But how much armor is enough to withstand hell's heat, the brutal terrain, the impact of combat without slowing them down? I need a ratio that can handle the load. The bones are getting stronger, so the muscles need to scale up to match. But the moment I bulk up the muscles, I need to consider how much heavier they'll be, and then I'll need just enough armor to prevent them from being vulnerable without slowing them down. It's like a constant push and pull between resilience and mobility, strength and speed. The right ratio could make the difference between an optimized hive that thrives in hell and one that collapses under its own weight. The front, warfare in hell is about firepower, just stack armor in the front and that will work. For these soldiers, the focus is on frontal armor. The chest, abdomen, and legs will be reinforced with denser, heat-resistant materials, allowing them to withstand the brunt of direct attacks. I'll need to make sure that the armor is thick enough to hold up against the extreme temperatures and violent combat, but not so heavy that they're unable to maintain their momentum. They're designed to take hits, push forward, and hold the line, so the more durable the armor, the better. However, the rest of the body needs to be lighter. I'll reduce the armor on the back and limbs, areas that aren't exposed as often, to save on weight and allow for more mobility. These soldiers will have more muscle to support the additional weight up front, making them more powerful in direct confrontation. The goal is to create a well-protected unit capable of absorbing damage without sacrificing their ability to stay mobile and effective in the heat of battle. The heavy front armor will be the cornerstone of their durability, while the rest of their design keeps them functional and ready to engage. I ordered the creation of one of these new units, the ones with reinforced frontal armor, to be grown in the hive's cocoon. It took an hour or so for the process to complete, time well spent refining the specifications. When it finally emerged, the soldier was imposing, its chest and legs covered in thick, heat-resistant plating, the material dense but still flexible enough for movement. The back and limbs were lighter, the armor designed just enough to provide protection without hindering agility. Now, it was time for the first tests. I ran a few basic trials, starting with heat exposure. The soldier was placed in a simulated zone with temperatures comparable to hell's worst environments. The armor held up well, barely showing signs of stress even as the temperature climbed. Next, I tested its endurance against direct impact. I had a few other members of the hive strike the soldier, aimed at the front where the armor was most concentrated. The blows landed with force, but the soldier stood firm, taking the hits without faltering. There was no immediate sign of fatigue, exactly what I'd hoped for. The flaw became apparent the moment the soldier began moving. At first, it seemed fine, a bit on the slow side, but stable. But as soon as it picked up momentum, I could see the problem unfold. The added weight in the front, combined with the muscle density, created too much forward motion. The soldier couldn't compensate once it started moving, and the momentum threw it off balance. Each step felt forced, as if the soldier was constantly fighting to catch itself, its movements jerky and unnatural. When the soldier tried to pick up speed, the momentum made it difficult to stabilize. The heavier torso and legs pushed the soldier forward, while the lighter back couldn't help anchor it properly. As a result, it couldn't maintain a smooth, controlled pace. It was fine when stationary or moving slowly, but any attempt at a more fluid movement caused the soldier to lurch forward, as if it was about to topple. I needed to adjust the back legs to fix this imbalance. Broadening the feet would give it a more stable base, allowing the unit to plant itself more firmly on the ground. I could extend the surface area, making it harder for the soldier to lose its footing during fast movements. But that wasn't enough. The hind legs themselves would need more power to push against the weight of the front. I'd need to increase their muscle density and structure, making them stronger and more capable of supporting the added load without sacrificing speed. By reinforcing the back legs and widening the feet, I could create a more stable foundation for the soldier. The power from the hind legs would counter the forward momentum, helping to distribute the weight more evenly across the body. This design shift would allow for better movement without the soldier stumbling under the strain. The additional muscle in the hind legs would also ensure that it could push through obstacles or combat situations without faltering, even with the heavy frontal armor in place. I'd need to rerun the tests once the adjustments were made, but this fix seemed simple enough. A broader, more powerful set of back legs could balance out the extra weight in the front. It was a logical next step. With the back legs now adjusted to better support the front armor, I realized I had an opportunity to enhance the soldier's offensive capabilities as well. Since the soldier's front was now a heavy wall, it made sense to take advantage of that by developing an additional ranged weapon. The idea clicked. I could add tendrils along the back, capable of shooting poisoned spines. This would allow the soldier to strike from a distance while keeping its armored front safely facing the enemy. The tendrils would emerge from the back, designed to reach over the heavily armored front legs and torso to shoot spines with precision. The tendrils themselves would be flexible and strong, capable of launching multiple spines in rapid succession. By adding this new element, the soldier could effectively strike before opponents even got close, using the advantage of range while remaining shielded by its durable front armor. It could engage enemies from a distance, disorient or damage them with poisoned spines, and then close in for a more direct fight once they were weakened. The tendrils wouldn't be overly bulky either, thanks to their placement along the back, and the extra weight wouldn't disrupt the newly balanced back legs. Instead, the tendrils would be lightweight yet deadly, adding versatility without compromising mobility or defense. If somehow the enemy got too close, well, this design was originally a melee unit. Hollow bullet, backquote degree. Degree backquote, hollow bullet. Zolraz sat hunkered against a wall as the sounds of battle raged around him. He glanced to his left and saw a fellow soldier get hit in the head with a spine. The shard of bone went right into his right eye and he fell backwards onto the ground twitching. What the hell is going on? Zolraz muttered. They were in the largest fortress in Treachery. It was controlled by none other than a general from the Pride Ring. They say General Madrid is part of Lucifer's inner circle and frequently dined with the de facto king of hell himself. His wife is actually a distant relative of the Lord of Pride Lucifer, which only served to further this illustrious reputation. Many thought this fortress was impenetrable, and so far for eons that has been correct. This fortress was a relic of the old world. They say these walls have stood when the old gods walked the world. The Abyssal Spire is a fortress whose exterior defenses are a blend of overwhelming height, impregnable strength, and lethal design, incorporating towering walls, fortified spires, and strategically placed ravelins to create an impenetrable structure. The outer walls rise to staggering heights, sheer and smooth, their obsidian faces enchanted to repel physical and magical assaults. Their vertical expanse alone renders ladders and siege towers useless, while their surfaces shimmer with infernal glyphs that burn those who dare to touch them. These walls are lined with battlements bristling with artillery, massive hellfire cannons, infernal ballistae, and flame-spitting emplacements that can rain destruction for miles in every direction. Every angle of approach is exposed to overlapping fields of fire, ensuring no attacker can advance unscathed. Reinforcing the walls are ravelins, massive triangular outworks that jut forward like jagged fangs, creating carefully designed killing zones. Each ravelin is a fortified platform, independent yet seamlessly integrated into the wall system. They house their own artillery emplacements, including smaller hellfire batteries and cursed bolt throwers, allowing defenders to unleash crossfires that pin attackers between the ravelins and the main wall. The ravelins are designed to break the momentum of any siege force, forcing them to expose their flanks to defenders as they attempt to bypass or assault these outworks. Crowning the walls are spires, each a towering fortress in itself. These spires act as bastions of defense, housing troops, ammunition, and arcane weapons reserves. Their height provides commanding views of the battlefield, while their artillery emplacements can fire in every direction, creating a second layer of defensive firepower above the walls and ravelins. The spires' designs are jagged and angular, deflecting projectiles and preventing scaling, while their peaks are tipped with enchanted orbs that unleash devastating energy blasts upon attackers. Everyone thought this fortress was impenetrable, and thus far it has been proven true. It was this confidence, this unshakable certainty, that shaped the world inside the walls. Unlike the grim and unyielding exterior, the interior was a realm of unimaginable luxury. The abyssal spire was not merely a fortress. It was a city, a haven for Hell's elite, a place where the ultra-rich could indulge in their every whim without a care for practicality or defense. Black marble mansions lined streets veined with gold, each estate more extravagant than the last. Magma fountains cast a flickering glow over opulent plazas, and streams of molten fire flowed like rivers through carefully carved channels. The streets were wide and open, designed for parades and grand displays, not for battle. No barricades, no choke points, only an unbroken expanse of decadence. The sovereign's palace dominated the center of the spire, a structure so vast it defied comprehension. Its mirrored floors reflected towering chandeliers of molten glass, and its throne room stretched endlessly, a cathedral of wealth and power. The walls were adorned with massive tapestries, and a river of liquid fire flowed through the center of the hall, bridged by crystalline walkways. It was a place of splendor, designed to awe and intimidate, but utterly defenseless should an enemy ever step inside. The spire's creators had seen no need for interior defenses. The ravelins, the spires, the walls, these were enough. They believed no force could breach the abyssal spire, so they built its heart not as a fortress but as a sanctuary of indulgence, a city where the elite could revel in their safety and wealth. It was almost ironic how this was the seat of pride within treachery. Zolraz gripped his Grimlock rifle as he peeked over the wall. The rifle in his hand was of an ancient design, a breech-loaded rifle that fired a powerful enchanted bullet. They say the older relic designs could hold more shots, but that technology was lost. Still, this rifle was only available to the forces of pride since they alone knew how to produce it. Its powerful shots were able to punch through enchanted shields, so it gave them a marked advantage in combat. Combine that with good firing positions born from ancient fortresses' design, it made them a terrifyingly difficult force to attack. For Thyr foes, their losses would be too great to bear in an assault that, as if their forces didn't break and run before that even happened. Only problem was when you fight a hive, they do not care for their lives, and fear is not even a concept they understand. Judging by the state of the ravelin far below, it seems terror did nothing to the forces of the hive. The ravelin was completely swarmed by the hive, their bodies covering it like a swarm of ants devouring some sweet morsel. The signs of fighting were fading in the ravelin, and fading quickly. He looked further to the left and saw the anti-air battery roaring as it sprayed shots up into the sky. The hive flyers were being kept at bay, but barely. The battery had been firing for hours, and the barrels were now glowing red hot. He turned to the left and saw his fellow soldiers firing desperately down holes built into the wall. These firing ports were designed to help deal with those foolish enough to attempt to scale the walls. The walls had specialized mechanisms that allowed scythe blades to sweep the walls, and also the defenders could release Inferni's infused oil down the sides to cook any scalers. However, they ran out of oil 3 days ago, and pretty much all the scythe blades have their mechanisms jammed and destroyed by the sheer amount of bodies trying to scale the walls. So now it was only a matter of time before the hive started to clamber over the edge. Things were going well for the first attack 2 weeks ago. They repelled the attackers even if that giant monstrosity the reports were screaming about didn't show up. Word is that freak was busy tearing a sloth fortress in half further down south. Zolraz also heard that the giant monstrosity tanked a titan exploding and just walked it off, but that was probably just crazy talk. Nothing could handle a reactor like blowing up in your face. Then Zolraz saw a claw stab right through the hole. The blade caught one soldier in the leg and he howled back as he staggered back, his leg now bleeding from a large gash. Another soldier ran over in a panic and fired down into the hold. There was a shriek of pain from the creature, and the claw went still. Zolraz turned back to look back over the wall just in time to see large claw grab the edge. They're coming over the top. A soldier shouted, and Zolraz barely stepped back in time to dodge a swipe from the emerging monster. It had a red carapace and its maw was gleaming with serrated fangs. Two beady red eyes glared at him with a hatred that would put even wrath demons to shame. Zolraz raised his grimlock and fired. The shot punched right through the head of the creature and it fell backwards over the edge. As Zolraz scrambled to reload, he saw another claw grasp the edge, and another, and another. This time the one that emerged had this heavily armored front. It was encased in a thick, red chitin exoskeleton with jagged ridges and spines. Its forearms are enormous, serrated blades fused with sharp claws. Its legs are thick and jointed, supporting its towering frame. Its head is angular and alien, with large, glowing crimson compound eyes that dominate its face, flanked by smaller auxiliary eyes. Below, its mandibles grind and click, framed by sharp, bony protrusions. Zolraz well trained, his reload only took a few seconds and in a flash his rifle was back up and he fired. His grimlock roared and the shot just pinged off the front armor. He could actually see the yellow glowing tracer go flying off into the distance. The other soldiers fired too but met with the same result. Whatever this thing's armor was, their shots were doing nothing. Then a flame spear struck the creature and the attack went through. The creature went tumbling back over the wall, but soon more started to appear. Zolraz and the other troops desperately started firing back, and their shots did nothing. Melee troops entered the fray and he saw one soldier's axe bury itself in the thick armor only to be stuck. The soldier panicked and tried to wrench it free, but with an almost annoyed bash the creature smashed the soldier off the wall and right down into the swarming mass below. Then there was a large explosion as one of the artillery pieces on the wall exploded and Zolraz was thrown onto the ground. His head was spinning and he froze when he realized he was right on the inner edge of the wall. He scrambled to his feet and looked for this rifle, but it was nowhere to be seen. The wall had devolved into a desperate melee that they were rapidly losing. If the wall was lost, then this fortress was finished. It had no interior defenses, thanks to the hubris of the original designers. Zolraz was just about to flee when this dog-like beast tackled him and pinned him to the ground. He could smell its purted breath on its face as he gazed up in terror at the maw filled with razor-sharp fangs. "I must say I always prefer hound-type bodies," the beast said with a feral grin, and Zolraz froze when he realized that the hive soldier just spoke. "Stupidly designed fortress, isn't it?" the hound said almost conversationally. "But then again, I suppose it is fitting for your kind, as the old gods once said," the hound said as he grinned. "Pride cometh before the fall. Hollow bullet, backquote degree. Degree backquote, hollow bullet. Ego strolled around the now decimated throne room and saw his soldiers dragging the general across the floor in a bloody heap. "Gentle." Ego snapped at the soldiers who stilled before trying to be more careful with the heavily wounded general. General Madrid was just a shredded mess. His legs were gone and his right arm was just a mass of shredded muscle. His left arm looked broken in 4 places. It was surprising that he was even alive. "This one is valuable. Don't want any of your breaking it," Ego said as he approached the shredded general. "As for this one's female companion, we have the 3 little ones as well," a nearby Praetorian grumbled out. "Irrelevant. Dispose of them," Ego replied, and the Praetorian nodded before sending out a message out into the hive mind. "Everything goes, except for officers and experts. Civilians are not needed," Ego added. "Extract information, then assimilate the biomass," Ego ordered, and an affirmative was sent out across the hive mind. "You can talk," Madrid rasped. "Yes, we can. Is it truly that surprising?" Ego said, and the other soldiers gave way so Ego could speak to the mangled demon face to face. "We thought you were mindless beasts," Madrid gasped. "I know. Funny how deception works, doesn't it? Or have you forgotten that every part of you came from somewhere? The things that made you also made us," Ego said with a laugh. "Then my family," Madrid rasped out. "Ah, you think because we have free will, we can be reasoned with. But here's the kicker. That whole empathy thing, that's something firmly in your side of the court," Ego said as he booped Madrid's broken nose with his paw. "We don't have that, because we don't need it. Case in point," Ego said smugly before biting down and ripping Mordred's right arm off. Before munching it down and swallowing. Crunchy. Take him away and suck the information out of his brain. Chapter 225. The Weary Soldier. Yale grumbled as he pushed another body into the cart. It was an emancipated thing. There just wasn't enough food to feed everyone. Somehow word got out that there was food in the capital because of the Averlonian Empire. So instead of fleeing south, more people had come to the capital. Which meant there was now a horrific overcrowding problem. Yael moved away from the cart and nodded at another human soldier who began pulling the cart to the fire pits. Yael shifted the fabric that doubled as a cheap face mask around his neck and grimaced at the thought of the useless thing. The idea was to keep the smell out, but honestly, at a certain point, it wouldn't matter because the stink will get into your clothes. All of your clothes. Yael looked towards the Averlonian safety zone and sighed at the sight of the massive blue bubble surrounding it. The dead were too numerous, and that meant disease. When you burn so many bodies, you get this horrible smog that makes people sick. Combine that with the already starving people, and you get epidemics of disease. More dead, more disease, more dead, and on it spins. So that barrier kept everything out and made the inside livable. Thanks, Yael. You take care of yourself, the soldier said as he let out a rasping cough. That cough isn't getting any better, Marcus. Yael said. Marcus was a Devonian soldier who, despite everything, did not desert his post. For all the problems of having such an undermanned military, the one silver lining was that those who remained and didn't desert were loyal. I'm fine, still got my strength and got my food. I'll be all right, Marcus replied as he let out another rasping cough. Yael clicked his tongue at the sight. His parlor was getting worse. The smog and disease was getting to him. Even some of the weaker cherubim were showing slight signs of sickness. But for the cherubim, recovery was usually quick, just a few days and they would have fought off the disease. Yael was stronger. He always has been, so the smog just served to stink up the air for him, and the diseases did nothing. Come here, Yael said as he beckoned towards Marcus. Marcus paused as he gave Yael a questioning look before approaching. Heal, Yael intoned quietly, and a small gold light emanated from his hand. He had to keep the power of the spell down to make it subtle, but it worked. A quick glance around showed no one had noticed. Marcus took a deep breath and hacked up some yellow phlegm that was clogging his lungs until now. He spit again to clear his mouth and he gave Yael a grateful nod. Thanks, that's much better, Marcus said. Don't tell anyone I did that. Inquisitors get pissy when we waste mana. Yael grumbled. Glad to see High Heaven values my life. Marcus replied wryly with a crooked smile. Don't start, Yael said with a sigh and a furrowed brow. Right. Sorry, Marcus replied with a laugh. See you around, Marcus, Yael said and Marcus nodded. See you, Angel, Marcus replied and he turned away. Not an angel, Yael muttered quietly to himself as he too began walking away. As Yael trudged through the makeshift refugee camp, he felt the invisible weight of judgment pressing on him, a presence as heavy as the despair hanging in the air. He knew they were watching. The Seraphim Inquisitors, with their piercing golden eyes and unsparing doctrine, had warned him time and again. Healing the sick and the weak was seen as a reckless waste of his power. To them, every spark of celestial energy expended on these wretches was a drop stolen from the war effort, a vulnerability they couldn't afford. The Inquisitors had no patience for compassion in war. They called it sentimentality, a weakness unbecoming of one of divine heritage. But Yael had argued, fiercely at first and more resignedly as the months dragged on, that these people were as much victims of the demons as any soldier on the battlefield. They harbor demons among them. One Inquisitor had hissed at him during a heated exchange weeks ago. You would pour your strength into healing only for them to betray us when the time comes. They are corrupted and your mercy weakens. Not just you, but all of us. Obey your orders, cherubim, you are no angel, know your place. Yael could still hear the venom in their voices, the disdain in their glances. To the seraphim, cherubim were already lesser beings, their lack of flight a symbol of their inferiority. His actions had only given them more reason to look down on him, to dismiss him as unfit for the divine work of war. But as Yael walked through the camp now, he could see none of the demons they feared, only humans clinging desperately to what remained of their lives. A woman vomiting in a filthy corner. A child lying limp in their father's arms. The Seraphim Inquisitors. Words echoed in his mind. If we lose you, it will be because of your own foolishness. Soldiers cannot be spared, not for these husks, not for their despair. You will regret this. He felt the consequences of their warnings in every step. His energy reserves were dwindling, his usually radiant glow now a faint shimmer. Still, his stubborn heart would not allow him to walk past the suffering. As he knelt beside an old man coughing blood into a rag, Yael hesitated, hearing the phantom voice of one Inquisitor in particular, stern and unyielding. When demons rise among them and strike you down, who will be left to protect those truly innocent? If the demons win, then this place will be the entire world. Yael's hands glowed faintly as he placed them on the man's frail chest, willing the worst of the sickness to ease. He would not let fear dictate his actions. Yes, demons might be hiding here, preying on the weak, but the alternative of standing idly by while humans perished was something he could never accept. If he lost himself to exhaustion, so be it. If the seraphim abandoned him for disobedience, he would endure it. Someone had to try to save these people, even if the heavens themselves would not. When he rose again, trembling slightly, he caught sight of two inquisitors standing at the edge of the camp. Their tall, armored forms glinted coldly in the dying light, their wings were ablaze with divine fire as if they were trying to ward away the darkness. But perhaps in a fit of cruel irony, the ones they were meant to protect shied away from that light and preferred the safety of the shadows. Yael noted that wherever the inquisitors went, the humans gave them wide berths. They were terrifying to them. Omens of divine wrath come upon a sinful race. As for the confessors, the berth they were given was wider still. Yael continued through the camp, his tasks were complete for the day. He was stronger than most cherubim and his abilities of arcane control was better than even some angels. Although he lacked the power of the seraphim, he was their superior in terms of fine control. His old instructor once told him that if he was born a Serpahim, he would be a candidate for one of the elite units of heaven. Alas, as his instructor quite bluntly put it, if only you were not born as you are, what wasted potential. Those words sting till today, especially considering Yael had no idea who his parents were. As is the fate of most cherubim children, they begin their lives under the scornful gazes of their parents and soon find themselves abandoned without even a name. Just as he was about to turn in for the night, he felt a desperate hand grab his leg. He looked down to see an emancipated mother grabbing onto his leg. In her arms she cradled a young child, who looked to be on the verge of death. The child was ill, but that was not all. The boy was all skin and bones. Just from a simple glance it was just a matter of what will kill him, not if he will die. Master Yael, the woman said, her voice cracked and weak. Master Yael. Only to the desperate would the word master and his name be used in the same sentence. My child is sick, the woman said. I know, but healing him will not save him. He is too weak. He will be ill again before the end of the week, that is if he lives that long without food. Yael replied, although his words were harsh, but he did not mean to be cruel. It was the truth that was cruel, and it was truth he could do little about. I know. I just want him to pass peacefully, a final kindness before the end. I beg you, kind soldier of the seraphim, the mother said as Yael saw tears drip onto the black mud below. Yael knew it would not be wise to heal the boy. It would just reduce his suffering, not save him. Magic was in short supply, demon incursions were common, and with the desperation in this place, fresh recruits were plentiful for the cultists. When you have nothing left, bargaining your soul may seem like a good proposition. Then again, Yael hasn't pulled his favors with the Averlonian safety zone in a while. What will you do, Master Yael? Yael flinched as he heard that familiar, almost mocking voice behind him. He turned to see none other than a hive hound staring right at him. Ego, Yael said as he turned to face the creature. Master Yael, Ego replied with a low chuckle. I just had a very interesting chat with someone else. The fool had a lot of silly ideas about who we are. But I suppose that is irrelevant. What is relevant right now is what you will do. Ego said as he sat on the ground and watched. Yael bit his lip and hesitated for a moment before making up his mind. At the end of the day, he was marked. The very fact that the Averlonian were willing to work with him and they would actually break the mold to help him has marked him for suspicion. This made him useful for both sides, which gave him a lot of leeway. But the war had to end at some point. And in all honesty, so would he. If the Seraphim won, he would most likely be put on trial. If the Seraphim lost, he would be dead. Yael made up his mind the moment he considered it. He was just trying his best to find some reason to go against it. But as usual, he came up blank. He couldn't just leave the child to die. He couldn't save everyone, but he could save him. Yael froze for a moment, hearing the boy's faint, raspy breathing. Yael grit his teeth and reached to cradle the boy's thin, trembling body. I will take him somewhere safe. I am sorry, Yael began, but the mother just smiled and shook her head. Go, with my blessing. I know my fate. I have made peace with it. The mother said in almost resigned fashion. I wish you good fortune and may we meet again. Yael said, and the mother nodded. To you as well. Thank you, young Seraphim. The mother said as she leaned heavily against the side of her shelter, her body relaxed as if her last burden had ended. Shall we, young Seraphim? Ego said with a low chuckle. I am no Seraphim. Yael snapped back and Ego just laughed in response. Indeed you are not. Ego replied almost smugly. The child's head lolled weakly against Yael's shoulder, his damp hair sticking to his fevered brow. His face was streaked with dirt, but beneath it, his pale complexion spoke of how close he was to slipping away. "You're going to be okay," Yael murmured softly, his voice a fragile beacon against the oppressive silence of the camp. The boy made a faint sound, somewhere between a whimper and a sigh, and one small hand clutched weakly at Yael's tunic. The weight of him was hardly anything, yet Yael's limbs trembled under the strain not from the child's physical mass, but from the emotional burden he carried. As Yael turned toward the camp's edge, his sharp eyes caught the Inquisitors once more. Their armor gleamed coldly in the fading light, and one of them stepped forward, his golden eyes narrowing. "Yael," the Inquisitor barked, his voice cutting through the murmurs of the camp like a blade. "You cannot leave. Your duty is here among the living. That child is as good as dead." Yael didn't stop walking, but he turned his head slightly to meet the Inquisitor's gaze. "If my duty is to the living, then I'll see that he lives. My duty is to all of them." The Inquisitor's voice grew harsher, his tone thick with authority. "You are risking more than your life, cherubim. The demons grow bold in this fetid pit. Your weakened state will make you an easy target, and when they tear you apart, another soldier is lost. We cannot afford your sacrifice for one boy." Yael halted. For a moment, the only sounds were the distant cries of the camp and the boy's labored breaths. "Then call me weak. Call me a fool. Call me whatever you want. But if we let him die, what are we even fighting for? If we cannot bear the weight of even a single boy, what chance do we have?" Yael replied softly in resignation. The Inquisitor's jaw tightened, his silence thick with disdain. But he didn't move to stop Yael, nor did his companion. Without another word, Yael turned away. Each step took him farther from the camp and his divine kin, the boy's fragile body cradled protectively against him. He could feel the child's uneven breaths against his chest, each one a quiet reminder of how little time they had. "Stay with me," Yael murmured to the boy, his voice low and soothing. "We'll make it. Just hold on." He could feel the faint hum of the boy's fevered pulse against his own, and he knew every delay, every misstep, could cost him. Yael had fought battles against demons that tore through flesh and cities alike. But this quiet act of defiance, of carrying one fragile, dying boy through a world determined to destroy him, felt like the truest fight of all. "I suggest you move quickly, he does not have much time," Ego said from the side. "And besides, how do you know the Averlonian Empire will even accept him? They didn't for the rest of these wretches. They haven't turned me down yet." Yael replied. "I suppose that is true," Ego said with a laugh. As they ran towards the great blue barrier, Yael heard signs of fighting suddenly erupt. He looked up and saw seraphim shoot into the air, their weapons out and blazing with divine fire. Yael grit his teeth at the sight. Of all times, why now? Then a demon burst out of a nearby shack, hurtling right towards him. Yael could barely react before White Blur tackled the demon. In one swift movement, Ego pinned the demon under him and closed his large jaws around the demon's head. His jaws closed with little to no resistance, popping the demon's head like an overripe grape. Yael flinched as Ego ripped what's left of the demon's head off and swallowed it whole. Ego turned to look at Yael, his face dripping with blood. "So what will you do? Leave that one behind and join the fight, or will you press on?" Ego asked with a tilted head. Yael hesitated for a moment, but in the end just moved to put the boy down. Demons could kill a lot more than one boy, and he was no fool. Smart. Tell you what, how about I bring that one over there? If they don't turn you down, they definitely won't turn me down, Ego said, and Yael looked at him with mixed feelings. He knew the hive could protect and save everyone. He had read the reports. The Averlonian Empire had food reserves to last decades with no drop in quality of life. If rationed, a century was not inconceivable. If the Averlonian Empire decided to annex Devonia, all this suffering would be over. But he knew that heaven would never allow it. An empire ruled by an ancient would not step any further into this land. So the people must suffer, and the innocent must die. "I'll go get the mum, later," Ego said with a grin, and Yael gave him a hesitant nod. "It's not that far anyway," Ego added as he glanced at the safety that Blue Barrier promised. "After all, we are almost there." Chapter 226. The Idyllic Royal. Princess Cheline groaned as she stretched her back. Her studies were grueling, but she understood the necessity. At the end of the day, she was the younger sister of Cecilia Averlon, the empress of the greatest empire this continent has ever seen. With territory from the eastern coast, through Zarima Desert and to the dead lands of Necronas. Chelene gazed down at the absolute mammoth of a tome titled The Masterworks of Civilization, the definitive guide to urban splendor by the visionary architect Aurelius Kendall. Despite its rather tactless name, it still was an excellent book on the subject. Especially considering Aurelius Kendall was the man who worked closely with her older sister and the great beast on the redesign of the capital. Chelene glanced out the window at the sprawling city below, and one word kept humming in her mind. Averlon. The name lingered in Princess Chelene's thoughts as she sat alone in her room in the Sovereign Spire. The cool evening breeze brushed against her skin, carrying the faint hum of the city's magic. Below her, Averlon stretched out in every direction, an unending sea of spires, streets, and enchanted light. It was impossible not to feel awed by its sheer scale, a sprawling metropolis that had been little more than a city-state just a few short years ago. Cecilia Averlon, Empress of the Averlonian Empire, founder of this thriving dominion. It was a name that would be etched into history, and deservedly so. In the span of a few years, Cecilia had transformed Averlon from a modest city-state into the beating heart of an empire that stretched far beyond its original borders. Chelene felt a rush of pride as she thought of her sister's accomplishments. Yet, beneath that pride was a sense of awe that bordered on disbelief. Cecilia has always been the most talented child, that was plainly obvious. After all, Chelene had no prophecies about her. Cecilia had always been destined for greatness. Even as children, Cecilia's vision had been unshakable. Chelene could still picture her sister standing pointing to the distant hills and rivers and proclaiming that one day they would all belong to Averlon. At the time, it had seemed like an impossible dream, the kind of ambition only a child could hold. Ambition was always something Cecilia had, and endless was her hunger. Perhaps that was why she found such kinship with the great beast. Averlon was alive in a way that few cities could claim to be. The Arcanum Quarter shimmered in the distance, its spires pulsing faintly with the energy of scholars and magisters who delved into the mysteries of the arcane. The gilded market, even at this hour, thrummed with the sound of merchants hawking their wares, goods from lands that had once seemed impossibly distant but were now part of the empire. Chelene could hear the faint clang of hammers from the artisans' promenade, where the city's finest craftsmen worked late into the night, creating wonders that would be marveled at across the empire. And yet, for all its grandeur, Averlon felt intimate to her, as if it were a living, breathing entity that recognized and embraced each of its citizens. Chelene had always felt connected to it in a way she couldn't entirely explain. Averlon was her home, her anchor, and the place where she felt most herself. As she looked out over the city, her thoughts turned once more to Cecilia. The Empress carried the weight of the empire on her shoulders, yet she did so with a grace that Chelene had always admired. It wasn't just that Cecilia was a skilled ruler, it was that she believed so completely in the potential of Averlon and its people. That belief was infectious, and it had spread through the city and beyond, igniting a sense of purpose and unity that had transformed a simple city-state into a sprawling empire. Chelene often wondered what her own role was in all of this. She wasn't a ruler like Cecilia, nor was she a scholar or a craftsman. She didn't possess the raw power of the magisters in the Arcanum or the shrewdness of the merchants in the gilded market. And yet, she felt deeply connected to the city, as if it whispered to her in a way it whispered to no one else. Perhaps that was enough. Perhaps her role was simply to see Averlon for what it was, not just a city or an empire, but a living, breathing testament to what could be achieved when dreams were pursued without hesitation. A faint smile crossed her lips as she traced the skyline with her eyes. Averlon was vast and beautiful and endlessly complex, but at its heart, it was still the same city she had grown up in, the same city where she and Cecilia had shared their dreams. And while Cecilia might wear the crown, Chelene felt that she too was a part of this grand creation. The city had shaped her as much as she had shaped it. And yet, Averlon was demanding. Its grandeur inspired, yes, but it also consumed. No one understood this better than the Empress, her sister, Cecilia. She carried the weight of the city with a grace that Chelene often envied, each of her decisions a vital thread in the colossal tapestry of Averlon's ever-growing empire. Chelene, by contrast, saw herself as little more than a shadow in her sister's light, free to admire the city's splendor without the crushing burden of ruling it. Yet there were moments, like this one, when Chelene felt as though Averlon itself was looking back at her. The faint hum of its magic filled the cool air, its towers casting long shadows that stretched like arms to embrace the distant horizon. But perhaps the greatest of Averlon's magic was its sense of meritocracy, and perhaps that was why the Averlonian Empire thrived. It was built on merit. Cecilia's vision had transformed not just the city but the very fabric of its society, replacing the stagnant traditions of old with a culture that rewarded talent, innovation, and ambition above all else. In Averlon, one's birth or station mattered little. It was the strength of one's ideas, the brilliance of one's craft, or the boldness of one's spirit that earned recognition. Scholars who once labored in obscurity now shaped policies that touched the furthest provinces of the empire. Merchants who proved their skill were granted titles that rivaled nobility, while even the humblest of artisans could see their works displayed in the imperial palace if they were worthy. It was a system that echoed the city's own ethos, demanding yet boundlessly rewarding, and it made Chelleen proud to see how it inspired people from all walks of life to rise, to strive, and to create. Of course, Chelleen could not ignore the catalyst of it, the great beast of the Elysian woods. The story is well known by now. No doubt one day it will be legend when no one alive was there when the story unfolded. A group of silly adventurers venturing deep into the forest on some treasure hunt only to release a creature long forgotten. Then that same ancient beast stumbled upon her imprisoned sister of all people, and that started the cascade of events that brought this entire continent to its knees. Her sister tore down the ways of old and built something new based on ways that are even older. Chelleen got up from her chair and decided to go for a walk, maybe meet some friends. She needed a break. She didn't have her sister's mind, but she was not exactly dull. Still, 6 hours of studying did cause her to feel a slight headache. She walked into her walk-in closet and started to get dressed. She has been in a comfortable nightgown for the whole day since she has in her room studying. Chelleen could have called for her servants, but it was late and she really didn't feel like speaking to anyone now with her tension headache. Chelleen gave her red hair and basic brushing, and got dressed in the usual frills of Averlonian nobility. The corset that was too tight, the stifling stockings, the uncomfortable garter belt, and the heavy dress that somehow managed to weigh her down while exposing her shoulders and neckline. It was a beautiful set of clothing that Chelleen knew. Aesthetically, it was the perfect blend of tasteful beauty, luxurious splendor, and a hint of sensual femininity. Honestly, Chelleen would just prefer a summer dress, but she was a part of the royal house and appearances must be upheld. Her dearest elder sister would not care, and anyone else would not dare even whisper a word of gossip on her. The hive's eyes and ears are everywhere, and even the stray rats in Necrona's knows how protective the Empress is of her younger sisters. Chelleen opened her door to see 2 of the royal guards standing dutifully as always. "Princess," one of the guards said, though their faces were hidden inside their golden armor. She knew every member of the guard from their voices alone. "Sir Athelion, I did now know you were on duty today," Chelleen replied, and the other guard laughed, revealing himself as Sir Calder of House Stormbane, a noble who decided to take the oath. "We did not wish to disrupt your studies, Princess," Calder replied warmly, and Chelleen let out a small bell-like laugh in response. "Going for a walk, my lady?" Calder asked, and Chelleen nodded. "How does a walk through the city sound?" Chelleen asked, and the 2 royal guards simply nodded in unison. Chelleen knew the question was pointless. They would follow where she went. If a threat appeared, they would lay down their lives for her, but still she wished to treat them as friends, not servants. "Then come along then," Chelleen said as she started walking, and the armored footfalls of her guards followed. Chelleen knew that her leaving the palace was a security risk to a degree, but her sister allowed it since the entire city was essentially in perfect control. No one would dare even to try to harm her. Chelleen knew her real guards were not the royal guards behind her. Yes, they were probably the best warriors the Empire had, but in the end they were ultimately still human. With all the weaknesses and limitations that humans came with. Her guards were custom creations, and from Cecilia had told her extremely expensive to produce. Her guards were known as briars, and from what Cecilia has said, each briar was worth a small city worth of people. 5 briars could take on most of the Averlonian army by themselves. It was difficult to imagine, but she saw them firsthand. They practically vibrated with power thanks to their twin ether cores. Cecilia has said they were designed to take on the likes of archdemons and archangels, which was a mind-boggling fact in itself. So in truth, Chelleen felt perfectly safe. There was nothing that could harm her in this city. Chelleen boarded a carriage and headed into town. She wanted to drop by the local business and economics university. She has made some friends there and wanted to enjoy some tea with them. The school was known as the Royal Academy of Commerce, and it took students from all across the empire regardless of status. Chelleen already got her degree and published a paper or 2, but in the end it just wasn't enough. Many of her friends thought she was a genius, but in truth she felt that was not the case. Compared to her sister, she was severely lacking. Even with all her achievement, which would be a point of pride for any normal citizen, she was struggling to even grasp the full scope of the empire. In the back of her mind she wondered what would happen once Cecilia departs this world. People grow old eventually. Honestly, Cheline did not think anyone could take the reins. Yes, she didn't need to do everything herself, but in the end, the Empress must know her empire inside and out. She must know how each piece works with each other, from the social politics of the vampires, the logistical challenges of the Zarima Desert, the state of shipping across the seas, and even how average citizen feels about their lives. It was an endlessly complex puzzle with constantly shifting pieces. So, no, she was not a genius, and Cheline knew she could not take her sister's place. They were not on the same playing field when it came to the demands of rule. Cheline disembarked from the carriage and swept into the grand atrium of the Royal Academy of Commerce, her fine cloak catching the sunlight streaming through the stained glass windows. The chatter of merchants in training and fledgling economists hushed as they recognized her, their bows and curtsies flowing like ripples in a pond. Alara, Brithen, Cheline greeted, as her eyes found her friends among the crowd. Both were second-year students at the academy, and though far from nobility, their wit and charm had endeared them to the princess. Alara, a raven-haired girl with ink-stained fingers, bowed deeply. Your Highness, to what do we owe this honor? Alara asked. Brithen, a lanky boy with a quick smile, followed suit. Not often the imperial family visits the drudgery of ledgers and trade laws. Especially considering how you tore through the curriculum, Brithen said with a small chuckle. Cheline laughed lightly. She did enjoy their fun little quips. It was refreshing, honestly. In the palace amongst the aristocracy, it was always Your Highness this, Your Highness that. As a girl at the tender age of 17, she needed some respite from the stifling court. I would hardly call this drudgery. Your studies fuel the engine of the empire, do they not? But, if you insist on my reason, she lowered her voice conspiratorially. I have come to steal you both away for tea. Cheline said with a small smirk. The two exchanged surprised glances, then Alara said, we would be delighted, though I fear our tutors may not share your enthusiasm. Oh, leave them to me. After all, I am the Empire's most persuasive negotiator, or so my sister, the most persuasive negotiator in the world, says. Cheline said dryly. Moments later, they found themselves in one of the Academy's private parlors, transformed with swift efficiency by Cheline's attendants into a cozy tea room. A small table, draped in Averlonian crimson, bore delicate porcelain teacups and an array of pastries that could make even the strictest economist reconsider their discipline. I have always wondered, how does the Empress feel about you mingling with us commoners? Brithen said. My sister trusts me to make my own judgments. Besides, Averlon thrives because we blend the strengths of many. Commerce and culture, nobility and common folk, all must work together if we are to endure. Cheline said as she took a sip of tea. There was a pause as the weight of her words settled over the room. Alara broke it with a grin. You've been practicing that speech, haven't you? Cheline laughed, her cheeks tinged pink. Perhaps. But it's true. Brithen leaned forward, his expression more serious. Speaking of endurance, what of this arrangement between the great beast and the angels? People whisper. You know. I cannot say. Cheline's smile faded slightly, though her composure remained. Cannot or will not? Alara asked softly. I can't. I just don't know. I am not privy to the most private and dangerous matters of state. Cheline's eyes met hers, a shard of uncertainty crossing her gaze. Cheline was sheltered from the worst parts of rule. The deal with the angels must have been dangerous, and that line must be treaded carefully. At the end of the day, everyone knew angels and ancients do not get along. I will say I am surprised. Alara said. My sister holds many secrets, no doubt it is for my own safety. The less I know, the smaller of a target I will be. Cheline replied. So you would rather be in the dark? Brithen asked curiously. I have heard the rumors of the court, of what had to be done to secure the empire. Greatness is not a clean affair. Cheline admitted. Well, in that case, may the future be cleaner from this day forward. Brithen said, and the group let out a small laugh at his optimism. The conversation shifted for a while, covering more mundane topics, and Cheline couldn't help but take a moment to appreciate it. Life was good in the empire. When her sister first took the throne, she promised food in every belly and wine at every table. It was an almost crazy promise when one took it literally, but amazingly it has been achieved. The only tables without wine are the ones where those occupying the seats don't want to drink. Her friends here were common born. Just a few years ago, their presence here would have been impossible. Their birth status was too low, so their potential would have been squandered. But now, as her sister said, no potential will be wasted. If you have the ability, the crown will nurture you. But still, Cheline's mind wandered to distant shores and the suffering of most of the world. She didn't know much, but she did manage to read some of the reports, and she did have a few conversations with the priesthood asking for her support in petitioning additional support in the East. Chelene has brought it up, but every time, she has seen that old dangerous look in Cecilia's eyes. It was the same look she always had when it came to the affairs of state, especially when said affairs were of the dangerous variety. It's not surprising considering the presence of demons, but still something more was going on. Chelene, you look troubled. Alara said. Apologies, but I was thinking about the situation in the East. Chelene replied. Oh yes, that is a horrid affair. We were looking into the refugee situation, and from what we can tell, it could be a big market, especially for royal contracts. Alara replied. Well, I wasn't talking about commerce, but more on the humanitarian side. Information on the situation there is tight and not much gets through the Royal Intelligence Bureau. Chelene replied with a sigh. The Spiders Bureau is quite effective from what I hear. Brithen said, referencing Serana's rather ominous moniker. She has earned it well, seeing as she was instrumental in the formation of the Empire. In truth, Serana was probably one of the most influential people in the Empire. I was thinking if I should go over there to see for myself, Chelene mused. Her two friends gave each other an awkward glance before looking up at the pair of royal guards standing behind her before internally sighing at their princess's naivety. I have a feeling that's not gonna fly with the Empress, Princess. Chapter 227. Faith in the Mighty. Phaeda swept through the temple as her avid and devoted flock. She was a child of the hive, but a well-concealed one. She looked like a human, and the story was that she was an ascended human. She was a loyal follower who was granted the great beast's blessing, someone who had risen above humanity's petty failings. Phaeda is a high mother of the faith of unity. She entered the temple with quiet grace. She wore flowing white robes adorned with golden embroidery, her auburn hair framed by a simple circlet of gold and silver. Her green eyes shone with warmth and wisdom, and her presence exuded calm authority. Just as her king designed her to be. The temple was grand yet serene, with tall marble columns and soft light streaming through stained glass windows. The air carried the faint scent of incense, and the sound of distant chanting lingered. As she stepped inside, the congregation grew silent, their attention drawn to her. The congregation adored her with unwavering devotion. Many bowed their heads in reverence as she passed, while others clasped their hands over their hearts, a gesture of unity and respect within the faith. Their eyes followed her every move, filled with admiration and a deep sense of trust. To them, she was more than a leader, she was the embodiment of their beliefs, a living symbol of harmony and hope. Whispers of gratitude and awe rippled softly through the crowd, recounting her acts of compassion and wisdom. Some reached out more tangibly as if to feel her presence, though none dared intrude on her path. Mothers held their children close, pointing to her as an example of grace and virtue. Elderly followers, seated near the temple's edges, murmured prayers of blessing for her continued guidance. Phaeda acknowledged their adoration with humility, her gaze meeting theirs with warmth and understanding. She moved among them like a calming tide, her presence inspiring peace and a renewed sense of unity among all gathered. Unbeknownst to the adoring congregation, Phaeda was not human and never had been. She was not ascended, as the other leaders of the faith of unity had been. She was created exactly as she was, a perfect vessel designed to embody the ideals of the faith and the will of the great beast. While the other leaders of the faith had once been human before undergoing the dark transformation that bound them to the beast's hive mind, Phaeda was different. She was a construct of pure intent, a flawless mask hiding the ancient, insidious power she served. The ascension process, reserved for the highest ranks of the faith, was a cruel twisting of humanity. Those who underwent it were hollowed out, their autonomy erased, their minds bound to the hive mind of the great beast. They became tools of its will, reshaped to ensure unwavering loyalty and absolute control over the faith. But Phaeda was never human, never bound by the transformation, because she had been made by the beast itself. Every detail of her, her beauty, her voice, her wisdom was calculated to inspire adoration and trust. Her purpose was singular: to be the face of the faith, the beacon of grace and authority that the people revered. Unlike the ascended leaders, she did not bear the scars of a lost humanity. She did not struggle with memories or echoes of resistance. Her existence was seamless and pure, crafted entirely to fulfill the great beast's purpose without hesitation or doubt. The faithful, unaware of the beast's true nature, saw her as their savior, a symbol of the unity and harmony they believed in. They did not see the truth behind her perfect facade, that Phaeda was no more than a tool of control, a being forged to perpetuate their blissful ignorance. As she stood before them, offering blessings and words of inspiration. The congregation's adoration was absolute. They saw in her the pinnacle of their faith, not realizing that her very existence was proof of their subjugation to the beast's grand design. In truth, she loved the deception, relishing every moment as she stood before the adoring congregation. To watch these fools worship her, to see them devour the lies she so gracefully wove, brought her a perverse satisfaction that she kept well hidden behind her radiant smile. Her emerald eyes, so warm and kind in appearance, glimmered with a private amusement as she moved among the crowd. Every bow of reverence, every whispered prayer, every tear of devotion felt like a triumph to her. They believed her to be the embodiment of unity and grace, never suspecting that she viewed them as pawns, cogs in the grand machine of the beast's dominion. When she spoke, her words were honeyed lies, carefully crafted to deepen their faith and bind them tighter to their servitude. She felt no guilt, no hesitation, only the thrill of watching them hang on her every word. To her, their adoration was a game, a show of her own mastery over them. Phaida loved her role not just because it was her purpose, but because it gave her power, a power she wielded with a subtle, cruel joy. She knew the truth they would never see, that their faith was a cage, their unity a chain. And yet, they adored her for it, raising their voices in songs of praise and offering their labor and devotion willingly. It was almost too easy, and that ease made it all the sweeter. Phaida's satisfaction wasn't rebellion against the great beast, it was alignment. She loved her creator's plan, reveled in its success, and took pride in her part as its most exquisite deception. To see the congregation kneeling before her, oblivious to the truth, was the ultimate gratification. In their worship, she saw not just her own triumph, but the triumph of the beast she so gladly served. Phaida's emerald eyes flickered with a knowing intensity as the man placed his frail son at her feet. The child's condition was grave, the unmistakable signs of a demonic curse etched into his fragile body. Blackened veins pulsed with unnatural energy, and a faint, malevolent aura clung to him like a second skin. The congregation murmured nervously, their fear palpable, for they knew that such a curse was a death sentence for most. Human magic, even from the most skilled healers, would falter against such darkness. But Phaida was no ordinary healer, and her magic was no ordinary cure. Kneeling beside the boy, she placed her hand lightly on his forehead, her expression serene. "Be calm," she said softly, her voice a soothing melody. "The light of unity will cleanse this darkness." She closed her eyes, and a golden writhing light bloomed from her palm, spilling over the boy like liquid warmth. To the congregation, it was a miracle unfolding, a testament to her divine power. But in truth, this magic was far from benevolent. Unlike the healing spells of human priests, which sought to banish curses and restore balance, Phaida's magic was a ravenous force, a direct extension of the great beast's hunger. As the light enveloped the boy, the curse resisted, writhing and coiling like a living thing. But then the curse realized what her magic was, and then the panic set in. Phaida's magic did not falter. It did not push the darkness away, it consumed it. The golden light became an inferno, devouring the taint with a voracious hunger. The curse screamed a sound that only Phaida could hear, as it was torn apart, its essence swallowed by the magic coursing through her. She felt it, the rush of power, the intoxicating sensation of the curse's energy being absorbed and transformed. The great beast's magic was not content to merely destroy, it feasted, converting the corruption into sustenance, fueling itself with the remnants of the darkness it devoured. Phaida's serene smile never wavered, but within, she reveled in the act. So much power in such a small vessel, she mused as the last tendrils of the curse dissolved. It is fitting that even the darkness feeds the beast's design. The boy's breathing steadied, his color returned, and his once blackened veins faded to normalcy. His eyes fluttered open, bright and clear, and he stared up at Phaida with a mix of awe and gratitude. "The darkness has been purged," Phaida said gently, lifting her glowing hand from his forehead. "Unity's light has triumphed." The father wept openly, falling to his knees. "Thank you, High Mother. You've saved him, saved us." The congregation erupted into murmurs of amazement and praise, their faith in Phaida solidified by the miraculous display. Yet Phaida's thoughts, hidden behind her serene expression, told a different story. Fools. They see only the light, never realizing its hunger. They believe I save them, yet they are mere pawns in a cycle of consumption. Even the darkness itself bends to the beast's will, its strength stolen to fuel its purpose. Rising gracefully, Phaida turned to the crowd. "Let this remind you that no darkness is beyond redemption through unity. Serve faithfully, and the light shall always protect." The congregation hung on her every word, their awe and devotion unmistakable. But Phaeda's satisfaction went deeper. She had not just destroyed the curse, she had taken its essence, turning it into strength for the beast and for herself. The act was not merely healing, it was domination, a reminder that even the foulest darkness could be made to serve the beast's insatiable hunger. As she moved on, her blessings resumed, and the crowd pressed closer. Phaeda's smile remained serene, but within, she savored the moment. They worship me as their savior, yet they are blind to the truth. The light they revere is as hungry as the darkness they fear, and it feeds on them all the same. The Eastern refugees, once devout followers of the angels in the faith of the Sacred Order, arrived in the Empire broken, desperate, and disillusioned. For generations, they had prayed to the celestial warriors to protect their lands, trusting in the angels' divine strength to hold back the tide of darkness. But as the demonic incursions grew more insidious, the angels, despite their might, were unable to shield the people from the creeping corruption. The demons, too cunning to engage in open battle, worked from the shadows, turning nobles, kings, and advisors to their designs. They sowed discord, manipulated alliances, and infiltrated the highest echelons of power, leaving the people defenseless. The refugees carried with them tales of despair, of battles fought valiantly but ultimately lost, of cities reduced to ruins, and of neighbors turned against one another by demonic influence. They fled westward in droves, abandoning their faith in the Sacred Order, which had failed to protect them, and seeking refuge in the prosperous lands of the Empire. When they arrived, they were greeted by a stark contrast. The Empire, untouched by the chaos consuming the East, stood as a beacon of stability and prosperity. Phaeda, the radiant High Mother, performed miracles with ease, healing the sick, banishing curses, and ensuring the Empire's bounty. To the refugees, this was salvation, proof of a faith that worked. They could not understand why the demons that had devastated their homelands did not follow them. The answer lay in the Empire's defenses, bolstered by the creations of the Great Beast. Among these were the creatures of the Hive, specifically designed to sniff out demonic corruption. These beings, extensions of the beast's will, could detect the faintest trace of infernal influence, ensuring that no demon could infiltrate the Empire's borders. The demons, knowing this, dared not challenge the Empire, for they understood they would be found and eradicated before they could spread their influence. To the refugees, these creatures were divine guardians, evidence of the faith of Unity's power to protect its people. To the demons, they were a terrifying reminder of the great beast's omnipresent control. Unable to follow the refugees, the demons remained confined to the east, where they continued their campaign of corruption and manipulation. For the refugees, the Empire's peace and prosperity were irresistible. Many abandoned their faith in the angels, questioning why their protectors had failed to shield them, and embraced the faith of unity, which offered safety and hope. Phaeda welcomed them with open arms, her serene smile and miraculous displays easing their doubts. They praised her as their savior, never suspecting that the peace they found was born not of divine unity but of the great beast's all-encompassing dominion. Phaeda's satisfaction grew with every refugee who knelt before her, their faith in the angels shattered and replaced by devotion to the beast's design. Let them leave their angels in the ruins of the east. Here, their faith feeds the beast, and the demons they fear only strengthen its hold. The great beast's dominion extended far beyond the mortal realm, its reach penetrating even the depths of hell itself. Within its hive in the infernal abyss, it forged alliances with select demon princes, each chosen for their power and ambition. Beelzebub, mistress of gluttony, Satan, lord of wrath, and Asmodeus, lord of lust pledged their allegiance, drawn by promises of power and favorable positions in the new order the beast envisioned for hell. These alliances were critical to the beast's grand strategy, though few knew the full extent of the deception behind them. On the surface, it seemed the demons avoided the Empire out of fear of the hive creatures designed to sniff out and destroy any trace of infernal corruption. This narrative reassured the faithful and bolstered their trust in the Empire's protection. Yet the truth was far more insidious. The demons and the beast had struck a pact. Rather than risk destruction within the Empire's borders, the demons funneled their chaos and corruption into the eastern lands, leaving the west untouched. In return, the great beast ensured their efforts undermined the angels while funneling refugees and power into its growing dominion. The demon princes, motivated by ambition, saw in the great beast a path to stability and influence within the fractured hierarchy of hell. The refugees, broken by the destruction in the east, abandoned their faith in the angels, whose protection had faltered. They arrived in the Empire seeking salvation, unaware that the alliances forged in hell had orchestrated their plight. Phaeda welcomed them with open arms, her miracles and reassurances binding them to the faith of unity and deepening the beast's control. The dissenting princes who opposed the beast worked in the shadows, seeking to sabotage its plans and rally resistance. But their efforts were fragmented, and they could not contend with the precision of the beast's designs. To Phaida, their defiance was insignificant. Let them linger in the dark, she thought, her serene smile masking her amusement. Their resistance only delays the inevitable. As Phaida took the podium of the Grand Temple, the room fell silent. Thousands of devoted followers filled the hall, their faces glowing with anticipation as the golden light of the stained glass illuminated the vast space. Her presence exuded authority and grace, her flowing robes shimmering with golden embroidery that seemed to capture the very essence of the Empire's splendor. With a slight raise of her hands, she commanded the attention of all, her voice clear and resonant as she began. My friends, she said warmly, her tone carrying both strength and compassion, today, we stand as a testament to what unity can achieve. In a world fractured by chaos, we have built an empire that thrives. While others struggle, we flourish. While lands beyond our borders crumble, our fields remain abundant, our people strong, and our future secure. She paused, letting her words sink into the hearts of her listeners. The questions before our empire are not problems of failure or degeneration, they are challenges born of progress. They are the responsibilities that come with achieving greatness and ascending to higher standards. These challenges demand thought, they demand action, and they demand unity. They call upon our sense of purpose and duty, and I know we are ready to meet them. Her emerald gaze swept over the congregation, lingering on their eager faces. Ours is a land of abundance, blessed with glorious beauty and filled with millions of happy homes. Within our borders, the institutions of progress flourish, and the fruits of accomplishment are secure. No nation is more loved by its people, and no people are more capable of rising to the occasion. I have an abiding faith in your integrity, your courage, and your resolve. And so, my friends, I have no fear for our future, it is bright with hope and brimming with promise. The crowd erupted into applause, cheers rippling through the hall as Phaida allowed herself a serene smile. She raised a hand gently, bringing the room back to silence as her voice grew more fervent. But let us not forget, she said, her tone carrying the weight of her message, that greatness is not merely a gift, it is both a duty and a purpose. It is not something we inherit passively, but something we must earn, something we must build and protect. To stand as an empire unmatched in strength and unity is not just our privilege, it is our sacred responsibility. Her voice deepened, resonating with conviction. Greatness demands effort, vigilance, and sacrifice. It calls upon each of us to play our part, no matter how great or small, in shaping a future worthy of our vision. It is not only an aspiration, it is a way of life, a purpose that binds us together and drives us forward. She gestured toward the murals that adorned the temple walls, vivid depictions of harmony, prosperity, and triumph. Look around you. See what we have built together. This is the legacy of those who came before us, men and women who understood that greatness requires not just ambition but commitment. They toiled, they sacrificed, and they dreamed, so that we might stand here today in a land of peace and promise. The congregation murmured in agreement, nodding as her words inspired a renewed sense of purpose. But, Phaida continued, her voice rising, let us not grow complacent. Greatness is not a destination, it is a journey. It requires vigilance and determination. There are those beyond our borders who envy what we have built, who cling to fractured beliefs and fading traditions. They seek to divide us, to weaken the unity that is our greatest strength. We cannot let them succeed. Her gaze swept across the room, her words striking with precision. The future we envision, the peace and prosperity we cherish will not come without effort. Together, we must rise to meet the challenges of tomorrow, as we have overcome the trials of today. Her voice soared with passion, ringing through the chamber with an energy that electrified the crowd. So I ask you, my friends, will you answer this call? Will you embrace this duty? Will you march forward, united in faith and vision, to secure the greatness that is both our destiny and our legacy? The congregation rose to their feet, cheers and applause echoing like thunder. Phaida stood tall, her serene smile a mask of poise and determination, her emerald eyes gleaming with satisfaction. They see in my words hope and purpose, and through their belief, the empire grows stronger. Together, we will not just meet the challenges ahead, we will redefine what it means to be great. The crowd cheered and applauded, a usual outcome for her speeches. Glory to the empire. One man shouted. Glory to the empress. Another woman shouted. Glory to the great beast. Chapter 228. Averlon Summit. The heavy palace doors groaned as they swung open, and Montes stepped into the grand hall. The polished stone floors reflected the light pouring through the high arched windows, making the space feel even larger than it was. His boots echoed with each step, a steady rhythm that matched his focus. The annual summit was always a tedious affair, but he understood its importance. Montes scanned the room out of habit, noting every exit and every cluster of nobles and guards. His armor felt heavier in the warm air of the palace, but he ignored it. He had worn this uniform for years, the white phoenix of the empire etched into the breastplate. It was a reminder of what he represented: stability, safety, and order. He had faced little true conflict in his tenure in the empire, but the responsibility of guarding the empire's heartlands weighed heavily enough. His aides trailed behind him silently, their presence reassuring but not necessary. He did not need hand-holding here. A subtle change in the room's atmosphere made him glance toward the entrance. Ordia's Derenge had arrived. The vampire's presence was as predictable as it was unsettling. The air felt cooler, and the natural hum of conversation in the room grew quieter. Montes watched as the other general moved with his usual grace, his red cloak brushing the floor. Ordius's pale face and crimson eyes carried an unnatural sharpness that always triggered something instinctive in Montes, though he trusted the man as much as anyone could trust a vampire. Montes forced himself to focus. Ordius's black armor gleamed faintly under the chandelier light. The man looked like he belonged in the heat of battle, not in a council chamber. Their eyes met as Ordius crossed the hall toward him. A simple nod passed between them. It was brief, but it spoke volumes. They did not need words to acknowledge what they both carried on their shoulders: different burdens for the same empire. Together, they climbed the wide staircase toward the council chamber, their footsteps a strange harmony of mortal strength and immortal elegance. Montes glanced sideways at Ordius once, wondering briefly how long the vampire could keep fighting the same battles, and how long he himself could keep waiting for a war that might never come. Then the doors ahead opened, and Montes straightened his shoulders. The summit awaited. Montes glanced at Ordius as they walked side by side toward the council chamber. "You're earlier than usual," he said, his tone neutral but with a hint of curiosity. Ordius smirked faintly. "Uncharacteristically peaceful day in the west. The elves must be plotting something. Are licking their wounds. The angels could make them stop, but they don't seem eager to give us any respite." Montes countered. Ordius chuckled softly, the sound low and dry. "Perhaps. Though they're stubborn, I'll give them that. I could say the same about your side. No demons yet." Montes shook his head. "Not a whisper. Just drills and patrols. Peaceful, but uneventful." "Uneventful," Ordius repeated, his crimson eyes glinting. "I envy you in some ways, Montes. Peace is a rare thing." Montes snorted lightly. "Easy to envy when you're not living it. I'd trade for action sometimes, though I suppose I should count myself lucky." "Luck has little to do with it," Ordius said, his voice quieter now. "Both our roles have their own costs." The two generals walked in silence for a moment, the sounds of their footsteps echoing in the vast hall. Finally, Montes spoke again. "Let's hope this summit brings something worthwhile. I don't think either of us enjoys sitting through politics." Ordius smiled faintly. "We agree on that, at least." As they reached the doors of the council chamber, Montes straightened his armor while Ordius adjusted his cloak. Without another word, they stepped inside to face the empress and the gathered members of the court. The council sat in a wide semicircle, their faces turned toward the generals as they entered. Montes's eyes swept over the assembly, noting the diverse range of individuals. The Averlonian Council was a reflection of the empire's most fundamental belief: strength above all. Its members were chosen not for their lineage, but for the strength of their actions, intellect, and achievements. Some had come from noble families, others from the humblest beginnings as peasants or even whores. It was their ability to endure, to excel, and to lead that earned them their place here. At the head of the chamber sat Empress Cecilia, the embodiment of the empire's ideals. Her presence alone commanded respect. Crimson hair framed a face that radiated confidence and intelligence, and though her ruby gown was elegant, it hinted at an edge of practicality. She was not merely a ruler by title but a leader who had proven herself through the trials of governance and strategy. Her piercing gaze fell on the generals as they entered, her nod a simple but effective acknowledgement of their station. Montes and Ordius moved to their seats, their every movement measured. They were here not as symbols but as instruments of the empire's strength. The council chamber was silent as the empress began to speak, her voice steady and authoritative. "The strength of this empire lies in its people, its leaders, and its unwavering resolve," she began, her words resonating with the core belief that united everyone in the room. "We gather here today not to rest on past victories but to forge ahead, to face challenges with the determination that has made us what we are. Montes straightened in his chair, the Empress's words sharpening his focus. Every decision made here would ripple across the Empire, testing its strength. Regardless of their origins, everyone in this room understood that they were here not by right but by the merit of their actions, their resilience, and their will to rise above challenges. Today would be no different. The annual summit was one of the Empire's most crucial traditions, rooted in its core belief of strength through unity. The Averlonian Empire was vast, encompassing a diverse range of lands and peoples, each contributing to its strength. To the east lay the human lands, the heart of the Empire, a region of fertile plains and thriving cities. Near the heartland stood the Ironhammer Mountains, home to the dwarves of Ironhammer, a stalwart people whose fortresses were carved deep into the rock. Their proximity to the central lands made them vital partners in the Empire's infrastructure and defense, their unmatched craftsmanship forming the backbone of many imperial projects. Beyond the human lands and the Ironhammer Mountains stretched the Zarima Desert, a harsh and unforgiving expanse inhabited by the resourceful lizardkin, whose survival skills and control of desert trade routes made them indispensable. Farther west, beyond the desert's edge, lay Necronas, the land of the vampires, a realm of eternal twilight and shadowed forests, home to the Empire's most enigmatic and powerful citizens. Despite the distances and contrasts between these regions, the Empire thrived because no part acted in isolation. The purpose of the summit was simple yet vital: to ensure that every region and its leadership understood what the others were doing. Each representative, from generals to administrators, gave a detailed briefing of their region's situation, its successes, challenges, and needs. The dwarves of Ironhammer often discussed advancements in fortifications, weaponry, and engineering projects that bolstered the entire empire's stability. The lizardkin provided insights into trade and survival in hostile environments. The vampires of Necronas reported on their conflicts and arcane developments, while the humans offered the strategic and logistical strength of the central lands. This exchange of knowledge allowed the Empire to act as a cohesive whole, adapting swiftly to threats and opportunities alike. Whether it was military campaigns, resource management, or diplomatic efforts, every aspect of the Empire's strength was laid bare in this chamber. No one, not even the lowest-ranking council member, could afford to be uninformed. Montes and Ordias knew their turn would come soon enough. The generals of the Averlonian Empire were expected not just to protect their territories, but to provide clarity and strategy to the entire council. Montes would report on the stability of the eastern human lands and the vigilance maintained against potential demonic incursions, while Ordias would update on the vampire-led efforts in Necronas and the skirmishes with the elves in the west. The dwarves of Ironhammer would likely discuss the maintenance of the mountain defenses or the innovations that could shape the Empire's future. This was as much a time to learn as to lead. The strength of the Empire depended on understanding, and understanding required every voice in the room to be heard. The annual summit began with the first speaker stepping forward. Montes sat straighter in his seat as Serana, the Empire's spy master, moved to the center of the chamber. Draped in her dark cloak, she carried an air of calm authority, though her reports rarely brought comfort. Her intelligence network had been critical in monitoring the demonic incursions tearing through the Devonian Empire, a crisis that was already spilling into Averlonian territory. The situation in the east continues to evolve, Serana began, her voice steady and measured. The Devonian Empire remains under siege from within, as demons infiltrate their ranks and exploit the chaos. Refugees continue to pour into the eastern human lands, fleeing both the demons and the angels' increasingly desperate efforts to maintain order. However, I must report that, to date, there have been no confirmed attempts by demons to infiltrate our borders through these refugees. Montes felt a slight easing of the tension in his shoulders. So far, the screenings have turned up nothing unusual, he added, his voice calm but firm. The refugees are desperate, yes, but they've shown no signs of demonic corruption. We've established camps to keep them safe while ensuring thorough inspections, and they've complied willingly. Montes said as he tapped his finger on his seat. Serana nodded. It appears the demons remain focused on the Devonian Empire for now. Whether this is by design or simply a matter of priorities, we cannot say. However, we must remain vigilant. Even if they have not attempted to use the refugee crisis to their advantage yet, the possibility remains. Empress Cecilia leaned forward, her expression thoughtful. Montes, are your forces managing the influx adequately? For now, yes, he replied. The camps are well guarded, and inspections are conducted regularly. The refugees have been cooperative, but the numbers are rising. If this continues, we'll need additional resources to maintain both security and humanitarian efforts. Ordias, his tone as sharp as ever, interjected. What happens if the Devonian Empire falls? Can your camps handle a flood 10 times the current size? Montis's jaw tightened. That's something we're preparing for. I've already sent requests to fortify our border towns and expand capacity in key areas. If the flow increases, we'll need help from the central reserves. Serana spoke again. My operatives are monitoring the situation closely. For now, the Devonian Empire remains the demons' primary focus, but the angels are losing control. If the tide shifts, we'll need to adapt quickly. The Empress's gaze swept across the chamber, her voice resolute. Then we will prepare as necessary. Montis, ensure your forces remain vigilant and supported. Serana, continue your intelligence efforts. I want updates on any changes, no matter how small. Serana inclined her head and returned to her seat, her update complete. Montis remained thoughtful. The refugees had brought no demons with them, but their presence was a constant reminder of the chaos raging just beyond the Empire's borders. If the Devonian Empire collapsed, the Averlonian Empire would face a test of its own, one that went beyond swords and shields. For now, vigilance and preparation were their strongest weapons. As Serana returned to her seat, the Empress gestured for Montis to continue. He rose, the weight of his responsibilities evident in his steady tone. In addition to managing the refugee flow into the eastern lands, we've established the Averlonian security zone in the capital of Devonia, Montis began. The zone is centered around our embassy, which has been reinforced as a secure hub for both military operations and humanitarian aid. From there, we've expanded outward, stabilizing key districts and providing support to the local population. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the council. The security zone serves multiple purposes. It ensures the safety of the civilians within the capital, many of whom have been abandoned by their own leadership. It provides a base of operations for our forces to monitor and contain demonic activity in the city. And most importantly, it radiates order in a region that has descended into chaos. Serana added, her voice calm but precise, my operatives embedded in the capital report that the zone has become a beacon of stability. Civilians flock to it, seeking protection and aid. The presence of Averlonian troops has discouraged both demonic infiltration and local unrest in the areas under our control. However, the demons are aware of the zone, and while they have yet to strike directly, their movements on the periphery are concerning. Ordias leaned back in his chair, a faint smirk tugging at the corner of his lips. Better the fire burns away from home than at our doorstep, he said, his tone sharp but casual. Let Devonia bear the brunt of the demons' wrath while we maintain control of the embers. The more resources they waste there, the less they'll have to threaten us. Montis shot him a measured look. And if that fire spreads unchecked, it will reach us regardless. The security zone isn't just about Devonia, it's about buying us time and leverage. Time is valuable, Ordias admitted with a nod. And leverage more so. But you're overlooking another advantage, Montis. The security zone isn't only a defensive measure. It serves as an ideal staging point should we decide that a preemptive strike against the demons is necessary. If Devonia collapses entirely, having a stronghold within the capital will allow us to act swiftly and decisively. Montis frowned but did not argue. The thought had crossed his mind, though he had focused more on stabilizing the region than planning for an offensive. But then again, this was why both Montis and Ordias held the same rank. The more defensive-oriented Montis was useful to counteract the offensive-focused Ordias. The Empress raised a hand, her voice calm but firm. Both of you make valid points. The security zone is necessary, but it is not without risk. Montis, ensure the zone remains a symbol of strength and order. We cannot allow it to become a quagmire. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes fixed on Montis. There are reports that a slum has appeared on the outskirts of the zone. It is said to be crowded with those who cannot make it into the protected areas. While it is not completely infested with demons, the conditions there are deteriorating. Possessions, disease and hunger are spreading, and such a situation risks becoming a breeding ground for resentment. Montis inclined his head. I'm aware of the situation, Your Majesty. We've begun dispatching supplies to the area, but the influx is overwhelming. Expanding the zone to include the slum would stretch our resources further than they already are. That is provided the Devonians even allow it. Then find a way to control it, the Empress replied, her tone unyielding. The zone's stability will mean little if chaos festers just beyond its borders. Address the slum before it becomes more than a humanitarian crisis. I trust you to handle this with the same precision you've shown in managing the zone itself. Ordias leaned forward, his crimson eyes glinting. And if that chaos spreads beyond the slum or the demons turn their attention to the zone, we will have the advantage. A fortified position in the heart of Devonia is not just a shield. It is a dagger poised to strike when the time comes. Let us not forget that. Montes nodded but remained cautious. A preemptive strike is not off the table, but it must be weighed carefully. For now, our priority is stabilizing the situation and ensuring the zone doesn't collapse under its own weight. The Empress gave a brief nod. Focus on maintaining order for now. But be prepared, should the situation demand a more decisive response. I will also be dispatching more resources for your use in the security zone as a precautionary measure. Montes returned to his seat, his mind racing with the challenges ahead. The security zone was a beacon of hope for some, a display of strength for others, and, as Ordias had pointed out, a potential sword to wield against the demons, Devonians and even the angels. Whether it would succeed or fail remained uncertain, but one thing was clear, the Empire could not afford to falter. As Montes returned to his seat, Empress Cecilia gestured toward the next speaker. Ordias rose from his chair with an almost languid grace, his crimson eyes sweeping over the room. Draped in his cloak, he exuded an air of calm confidence that commanded attention. My report concerns the ongoing situation on the borders of Necronas, Ordias began, his voice smooth and deliberate. The elves of the Wood of the Ancients persist in their attempts to disrupt our operations. Their attacks, however, are little more than nuisances. They strike at the periphery, targeting minor outposts and supply lines, but none of these actions have posed any real threat to our forces or our control of the region. He paused, his gaze briefly meeting the Empress's before moving to the rest of the council. These skirmishes are the actions of a desperate people. The elves view Necronas as a trespass on their sacred groves. Their strikes lack coordination or significant effect, serving more to irritate than to harm. For every raid they launch, our forces respond swiftly and decisively. They have yet to achieve anything of consequence. Montes leaned forward slightly. If their attacks are inconsequential, why do they persist? Ordias's lips curled into a faint smirk. Pride and fear, Montes. To them, we are not merely enemies. We are an existential threat, a presence they see as unnatural and unacceptable. It doesn't matter that we've held these lands for millennia. Their actions are driven by symbolism, not strategy. They are long-lived, but so are we. As far as we are concerned, the old grudges are still very pertinent. Sarana interjected, her tone measured. Could they have outside support? Someone encouraging or aiding their efforts? Ordias's expression darkened slightly as he considered her question. The angels could be backing them, though I doubt the angels have resources to spare. Devonia's collapse has stretched their forces thin, leaving them scrambling to contain their own problems. While it is not impossible, I find it unlikely that they could divert meaningful aid to the elves, even if they wished to. Montes furrowed his brow. And if the angels were involved, they would be making a grave error, Ordias said sharply. Interfering in Necronas would be a declaration of hostility. It would give us every justification to retaliate, something I suspect they are not eager to provoke. Empress Cecilia rested her chin on her hand, her crimson eyes blazing as they locked onto Ordias. Are your forces sufficient to manage these skirmishes without straining your resources? More than sufficient, Your Majesty, Ordias replied with smooth confidence. These raids are little more than training exercises for my border troops. We've suffered no significant losses, and morale remains high. However, if their persistence continues unchecked, it may become necessary to send a stronger message. Montes raised an eyebrow. Are you suggesting a direct offensive? Ordias inclined his head slightly. A series of calculated strikes into their territory would remind them that their provocations come at a price. It would not require a full campaign, merely a demonstration of our ability to strike at will. The Empress tapped her fingers lightly on the arm of her chair, her expression thoughtful. For now, containment is sufficient. But if the elves escalate their efforts, I will authorize more decisive action. In the meantime, Ordias, you are to draw up a full invasion battle plan as a contingency. If the time comes to strike, I want us prepared to end this conflict swiftly and decisively. She leaned forward, her crimson eyes glinting dangerously. If the elves wish to test the Empire, they will learn the price of their folly. We will burn everything from the Necrona's border to the Sea of Ancients. Ordias inclined his head deeply, a flicker of satisfaction crossing his face. As you command, Your Majesty. I will ensure the plan is thorough and ready for your approval. The Empress straightened in her chair, her tone firm and commanding. Continue your containment efforts and report any changes along the border immediately. We will not act rashly, but we must be ready for all possibilities. Returning to his seat, Ordias maintained his relaxed demeanor, though the intensity of the discussion lingered. The elves, Attacks might be inconsequential now, but the Empress's words underscored the gravity of the situation. The Empire would not tolerate threats, whether minor provocations or full-scale attacks, and it would respond with fire and steel if necessary. As Ortiz resumed his seat, Empress Cecilia gestured for the next speaker. The Duchess of Cathay rose gracefully, her composed demeanor reflecting her role as the Empire's chief diplomat in the East. Your Majesty, members of the Council. She began, her voice clear and steady, I bring updates on our relations with the Naga clans and the Mugamans, both of whom are critical to the eastern trade routes. She turned first to the Naga. The Naga have upheld their agreement not to raid Averlonian ships, a condition they continue to honor. However, they remain highly active in attacking the vessels of Devonia and the merchant princes. This has caused a surge in demand for Averlonian naval escorts along the eastern trade routes, making such services highly lucrative for the Empire. While this situation benefits us for now, their unpredictable nature means we must continue to monitor them closely. Shifting to the Mugamans, the Duchess allowed a slight smile. The Mugamans have increased trade significantly, granting us unprecedented access to the spoils of their jungle home. Exotic goods, medicinal plants, and rare materials now flow into Averlonian markets, strengthening our economy and bolstering our position as a dominant power in Eastern trade. Despite their usual suspicion of outsiders, they have shown a surprising willingness to deepen this partnership. Before the Duchess could continue, Empress Cecilia raised her hand, her crimson eyes gleaming with quiet certainty. The Naga and the Mugamans will honor their agreements. This is no simple accord based on mutual convenience. It is a pact born of necessity and sealed by forces far beyond their reach. Montes furrowed his brow slightly, curiosity flickering across his face. Your Majesty, if I may ask, what gives you such certainty? Both the Naga and the Mugamans are known for their opportunistic nature. Cecilia's lips curled into a faint, enigmatic smile. Because they will not defy their dark mistress, Cerchax. The pact is recent, forged between the great beast and the eternal serpent Cerchax, who commands the loyalty of both the Naga and the Mugamans. This is no mere agreement of trade or strategy, it is a decree from their revered goddess. For them, to break the pact is unthinkable. The room fell into silence, her words carrying a gravity that none dared question. The Duchess inclined her head, acknowledging the Empress's assertion. As you say, Your Majesty. For now, the arrangements remain stable and profitable for the Empire. Good, the Empress replied. Maintain these relationships, but ensure that Averlon continues to honor its side of the pact. While Cerchax's will binds the Naga and Mugamans, we must ensure there is no reason for her favor to shift. As the Duchess returned to her seat, Montes found himself deep in thought. The Empress's certainty now made perfect sense. The great beast's recent dealings with Cerchax had created an alliance far beyond the reach of mortal negotiation. The Mugamans and Naga, deeply tied to their dark mistress, would not dare defy her will, no matter their personal ambitions. Montes could not help but wonder how many other such deals had been struck in the shadows. He knew, though the knowledge was unspoken, that the Empress and the great beast had made many secret pacts across the world. These agreements, some likely ancient and others recent, served as unseen threads holding the Empire together. Whether with gods, monsters, or entire civilizations, these arrangements ensured that Averlonia thrived where others faltered. He kept his musings to himself, but as the council moved to the next speaker, the thought lingered. The Empire's strength was more than armies and fortresses, it was a web of alliances and bargains stretching far beyond what any single mortal could grasp. As the Duchess of Cathay returned to her seat, Empress Cecilia gestured toward the next speaker. The Archmage of the Empire, a stoic figure cloaked in simple yet regal robes, rose. With a measured nod, his demeanor was calm and professional, befitting his station as the Empire's master of the arcane. Your Majesty, members of the Council, he began, his voice steady and precise, I am pleased to report that the Empire's arcane infrastructure remains largely stable. The protective wards surrounding our cities are holding at full strength, and the leyline network remains functional across the territories. He paused briefly, his gaze sweeping across the chamber. As you all know, the eternal font is the center of all magic. It is a nexus where the raw essence of mana converges, and its unparalleled concentration of magical energy fuels much of the Empire's arcane might. However, such immense power comes at a cost. The font's immediate area is utterly inhospitable to all forms of life and even to constructs. The mana radiation there is so intense that it fries everything that enters, reducing even the most resilient constructs or magical projections to useless slag. No mortal or machine can approach it. The Archmage continued, his tone measured. Because of this, we can only study the font indirectly, by monitoring the surrounding leyline network from afar. Recently, we have observed significant fluctuations in the energy patterns, large dips that suggest something is draining the font. These deviations are beyond the usual seasonal shifts and are without precedent. That said, they pose no immediate threat to the font's integrity or to the empire. Ortiz raised an eyebrow, his voice sharp. If you can't inspect it directly, how can you be certain this isn't some natural cycle of the font? That remains a possibility, the Archmage admitted. However, the scale and frequency of these energy dips suggest something far more deliberate or anomalous. Natural cycles of the font tend to have gradual ebbs and flows, but these fluctuations are abrupt and erratic. Even so, the font's reserves are so vast that these dips, while curious, do not endanger its stability. Montes frowned. And if this draining continues? The font's energy reserves are beyond mortal comprehension, the Archmage replied. Even with these fluctuations, its core integrity remains at no risk whatsoever. Furthermore, the leyline network around the font is robust enough to absorb and distribute the variations without destabilizing our magical infrastructure. The Empress, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. Her tone was calm and certain. Continue your observations, Archmage, but do not trouble yourself unnecessarily. The font's stability is not in question, nor does it require our intervention. The Archmage inclined his head, though his expression betrayed a flicker of curiosity at her assured tone. As you say, Your Majesty. I will ensure that my mages monitor the situation closely. Montes, observing the exchange, felt a nagging unease. The Empress's words carried an unmistakable air of certainty, as though she already knew the source of the fluctuations and had no reason to fear it. Her confidence was not born of ignorance, but of understanding she chose not to share. As the Archmage returned to his seat, Empress Cecilia gestured toward the next speaker. The Minister of Trade, a portly man dressed in a finely tailored robe adorned with the insignia of Averlonia's commerce guilds, stood with a confident smile. His jovial demeanor and sharp wit often masked the sharp mind that had secured the Empire's position as a dominant economic power. Your Majesty, esteemed members of the Council, he began, his voice rich and enthusiastic. I am pleased to bring you good news. The Empire's economy is thriving, driven by both internal growth and our advantageous trade agreements. He raised a hand slightly, gesturing as he spoke. First, let us look at the eastern trade routes. Our naval escorts for merchants traveling past the Naga waters have not only increased trade security but also generated significant revenues. The Naga's raids on Devonian and merchant prince vessels have pushed traders to flock to our protection, and they are more than willing to pay the premium. He smiled broadly, his tone triumphant. Meanwhile, the goods flowing from the Muguman jungle's exotic herbs, rare minerals, and unique crafts have invigorated our markets, creating a surge of demand across the Empire. These imports have not only increased merchant activity but also stimulated domestic industries eager to process and refine these resources for further trade. Pausing for effect, the Minister of Trade clasped his hands together. Our agricultural output in the Central Lands has also exceeded expectations, with surpluses feeding not only our citizens but also creating a profitable export market. Our lizardkin friends have been very appreciative of the cheap agricultural products that we offer. He glanced around the room, his tone growing slightly more serious. Of course, success brings its challenges. The booming trade has led to congestion at major ports, particularly in the eastern provinces. To maintain this momentum, I propose an expansion of our dock facilities and the addition of new trade routes to relieve the bottlenecks. With your approval, these measures will ensure that the Empire continues to prosper without interruption. The Empress inclined her head slightly, her crimson eyes calm but attentive. Your report is well received, Minister. The prosperity of the Empire is paramount, and I will authorize the necessary resources to expand our infrastructure. See to it that this growth is managed wisely. The Minister of Trade bowed deeply, his face beaming. It shall be done, Your Majesty. As he returned to his seat, the chamber seemed to relax slightly, buoyed by the good news. Montes, though ever vigilant, allowed himself a rare moment of appreciation. In a world fraught with conflicts and challenges, the booming economy was a reminder of the Empire's resilience and dominance. The wealth flowing through Averlonia's veins was as much a source of strength as its armies are magic. As the Minister of Trade returned to his seat, the Empress gestured toward the next speakers. The following reports, while important, carried the air of routine. The Lizardkin ambassador from Zarima spoke of the desert's dependence on Averlonian grain and the steady trade in rare minerals and alchemical components Zarima sends in return. His tone was respectful, and his requests for continued support were expected, reflecting the ongoing challenges of the arid region. There was little in his report to surprise the council, and naturally the Empress gave all that he asked and more. Loyalty is rewarded in the Empire, that much was clear. Next came the dwarven delegate from Ironhammer, whose report focused mostly on the steady supply of mithril, their primary export. The dwarves' mastery of forging the rare, magic conductive metal had made Ironhammer an invaluable partner to the Empire's military and arcane industries. Mithril flowed in abundance, fueling the crafting of enchanted weaponry, armor, and intricate tools of war. While he mentioned minor concerns about resource strain, he assured the council that production would meet the Empire's demands without issue. Finally, the Minister of Population Administration stood, her report methodical and predictable. Population growth was steady, supported by strong agricultural output and stable governance. She noted the refugee influx from Devonia but assured the council that settlement programs were managing the strain. Her recommendations for adjustments to taxation and resource allocation drew nods of acknowledgement but sparked no debate and easily passed. The chamber buzzed quietly between speakers, the council absorbing the reports with little fanfare. For Montes, these updates, while valuable, were a reminder of the Empire's sheer complexity. Each speaker's domain contributed to the larger whole, a machine of immense size and power that relied on the predictable, even mundane, operation of its many parts. Empress Cecilia, ever composed, acknowledged each speaker with a nod. Her demeanor betrayed no impatience, only quiet authority. The reports were expected, the Empire's foundation strong. For now, all was as it should be, and the Empress passed her decrees freely, giving each member the resources they needed to succeed. As the Minister of Population Administration resumed her seat, the Empress gestured for the final speaker. A hush fell over the chamber as Legiana rose, her presence immediately commanding attention. Towering and regal, her sleek insectoid form radiated an air of alien elegance. Her brilliant white carapace gleamed faintly in the chamber's light, smooth and polished, giving her a nearly statuesque appearance. Her domed head, smooth and eyeless, reflected the light like a moonlit stone, while a long, whip-like tail extended from the back of her head, swaying gently with an almost hypnotic rhythm. Her digitigrade legs, bent backward at the joint, added a feline grace to her movements, and every step seemed deliberate, poised. When she spoke, her voice filled the chamber, calm yet unnerving, its perfect mimicry of human speech unsettling to those who listened. The cadence was flawless, too flawless, as if stripped of all the imperfections and nuances of true human communication. It was a voice that felt practiced, designed even, yet it carried a subtle dissonance, an uncanny edge that made the skin crawl. Your Majesty, members of the Council, she began, inclining her head slightly toward Empress Cecilia. I bring the voice of the Hive and the will of the great beast to this assembly. The Hive stands ready, as always, to serve the Empire. Her words were measured, her tone betraying nothing, but the raw, alien nature of her presence was inescapable. The great beast's hive was the silent pillar upon which the Averlonian Empire stood. Its creatures vast, varied, and utterly loyal were woven into every facet of the empire. From laborers in the farmlands to engineers in the workshops, from advisors in the courts to the majority of the empire's military strength, the hive was both its heart and its shield. Our efforts continue to bolster the empire in every capacity, Legiana continued. The agricultural zones are thriving under the care of our labor divisions. The production of mithril and other critical resources is supported by our excavation and transport capabilities. On the military front, our warriors remain ever vigilant, patrolling borders, securing strategic points, and responding to threats before they reach imperial soil. Her head tilted slightly, and her voice, still unnervingly perfect, grew more deliberate. The hive has increased its presence in Devonia. Our deployments are focused on stabilizing the region and supporting Averlonian operations there. Additionally, as a precaution, hive divisions are marshalling along the borders with the Wood of the Ancients to counter the elves' continued provocations. While we do not anticipate immediate conflict, the hive is prepared to act decisively should the situation escalate. She paused, her voice lowering slightly but losing none of its eerie perfection. And we have prepared for the angels. Though they are currently mired in their struggles within Devonia, their nature is to intervene, to meddle. Should they turn their misguided attention toward the Empire, we are ready. Her voice sharpened, the calmness giving way to something primal, ancient, and raw. They are fools, clinging to their fading light, unaware of the abyss that awaits them. If they dare to challenge the hive, we will devour them all. A heavy silence fell over the room. The weight of Legiana's words was suffocating, her declaration leaving no doubt that the hive would not merely defend the empire but utterly annihilate any who dared to stand against it. Her words were not a threat. They were a promise, delivered with the cold certainty of a predator confident in its hunt. Montes shifted uneasily in his seat, the image of angels, beings of light, power, and righteousness falling before the relentless, consuming tide of the hive burning into his mind. For all the empire's strength, it was the hive that cast the longest shadow. Legiana's head tilted again, her featureless dome aimed toward the council. The great beast remains ever watchful. His wisdom guides us, his strength empowers us. The hive exists to serve this empire, as we have since its founding. Together, we stand unshaken. Empress Cecilia inclined her head slightly, her crimson eyes meeting the featureless dome of Legiana's head without a flicker of unease. Her voice, calm yet authoritative, carried a rare warmth. Your words are as resolute as your service, matriarch. The hive's contributions are the cornerstone of our strength, and we shall continue to honor this bond. Convey my gratitude to the great beast. Legiana bowed deeply, her movements unnervingly fluid despite her imposing form. Her tail swayed gently as she resumed her seat, but the tension in the air lingered, a quiet reminder of the primal force that had just spoken. No matter how civilized she appeared, no one in the chamber could forget what Legiana represented, a connection to something ancient, savage, and older than any of them could imagine. As Montes left the council chamber, he felt an unusual heaviness settle over him. The intensity of the discussions, particularly Legiana's chilling declarations, left him feeling drained, as though he had just walked through a storm of raw power. And yet, there was an odd reassurance in the aftermath. The Empire's strength, fortified by the hive's primal ferocity and unwavering loyalty, was undeniable. No matter the challenges angels, elves, or any other threat, the great beast and his hive would ensure that Averlonia endured. Montes allowed himself a rare moment of solace. The Empire was in terrifyingly capable hands. And if it really came to all-out war across the world, well, at least the hive is on their side.